serious TV drama podcast. I'm Scot, and joining me tonight, the summer man to my man with a plan, and the lost horizon to my Waterloo. Hey, it's not just some guy who walks into an advertising agency. It's Mr. Kevin Howard. How are you doing this fine evening, Kevin?
I'm doing pretty grand. How are you?
I am doing... Well, I'm a little sweaty because it's a little humid, as you know, here in Brooklyn. Yeah. And, you know, when you're recording a podcast, I can't have any of the fans going. So it usually hits me 2 minutes before we start recording where the first bead of sweat on my head. Yeah. But other than that, I'm absolutely fine. I've been looking forward to this podcast. Been talking to you about it off and on for a little while now. Before I get into what this podcast is about and everything else, let's take care of something right off the bat. I'm guessing probably all of our regular listeners are all like, who dat now? So before we get to the folks of what this podcast is about, we're going to turn our sights on to you, Kevin. Now, I confess, I had you marked down as a possible guest co-host probably literally a few minutes after I finished compiling this countdown way back in early October. But right now, all folks know about you is like, he's got a decent set of pipes. So we're going to make like it's one of those 50s game shows now, like, what's my line? So, who are you? What do you do? What do you say? The whole spiel.
Yeah, I am Kevin. I work at the original home of Mad Men at AMC. I'm the director of production for branded content, and that just means anything that's sponsored. So if you see a sponsor logo, whether it's 5 seconds of brought to you by AT&T or like a 30-second commercial of Walking Dead zombies eating KFC, I had something to do with it in some sense.
Oh, that's right. Do you have some involvement do they do like these little special programming things, maybe more for the website, which I think tend to be sponsored by someone else, like the webisode kind of things? Is that?
Yeah, more and more lately, they've merged the AMC digital department with my department, so there's a lot more cross work. But yeah, even when you click play on it and it says Subaru presents behind the scenes of Better Call Saul.
Right.
I directed somebody to do that.
Oh, see, everybody, we got a muckety muck. Ain't that cool? Anyway, and just to be clear, I mean, I know you from hanging out in bars, basically.
Yeah, it's a good way to get to know me.
Which is also extremely appropriate for the show that we'll be talking about tonight, more so than anything. But obviously, knowing your connection with AMC, I just thought it might be a nice, boost and a goose to our podcast, just to get a different perspective, especially on things that are AMC related. Although yep. Knowing as I know you, I guarantee you would have been a fine guest for any of the 1,000 HBO series that landed in this damn count. Seriously, it's like we should have a sponsorship at HBO at this point.
I mean, I grew up in the town that inspired Maplewood on Leftovers.
See, you've already won at least one or two ardent fans on the podcast already. Just not me. No, anyway, we are here for that countdown I spoke of. Only the greatest TV drama episodes of all time countdown. And we have reached, I guess you'd call it the penultimate number, the runner-up, the Riker to the Picard of the countdown. Although, to be honest, I could even debate flipping the number 1 and number 2 choices. I mean, it's almost a coin flip for me. That's probably more a topic for the number 1 episode podcast. Because like I said, we're up to number 2, which of course is the iconic episode from the 4th season of Mad Men, The Suitcase. Yay.
Yay.
Yeah, well, I've got the little sound thing for applause. You'd think I would have used it for that. But, it just sounds like worst sound effects ever. Anyway, it won't stop. But since we keep speaking of the countdown, something you're not familiar with because you're fortunate to not have listened to us before, I do this little disclaimer at the beginning of each one, which I never really script, so it takes on all different forms every time I do it. And it's especially appropriate that I do it this evening because this episode is one of the main reasons I felt the need to outline the rules every time I do this countdown. This countdown while it may occasionally seem to have a few of my personal favorites, does not actually or solely reflect my own personal preferences or biases. It was derived through researching, I'd say, a dozen or more articles, websites, ranking websites, those kind of things, and all sorts of similar lists that were put out over the past several years. I basically put all that information together, and first I had to weed out any series/episode that had already had either an entire podcast or a significant podcast segment devoted to it. So, therefore, that's why no episode of Better Call Saul was eligible. As much as I would have loved to have talked about it, but we've actually recorded a podcast devoted to each and every episode of that show, so it can't be in the countdown. That's why the Americans didn't make the list, because the number one choice would have been the series finale, and we already had like a 47-something minute segment devoted to that episode way back in 2018. Why am I saying all this? It's because the episode tonight, I will point out, was discussed on one of our massive Mad Men entire season coverage podcast that we did back in, I guess, the first quarter of 2015. It was probably, it was obviously during the season 4 podcast that we did. I think we actually broke that into 2. My belief is that the conversation for the suitcase was probably 15, 20 minutes. I don't recall it being longer than that. But more, because, you could talk about an entire season. But more importantly, it was a part of the overall season conversation, as opposed to just having one segment devoted to it. So that, basically, this is all me trying to do a limbo here to get away with being able to use it. Because otherwise one might say, I couldn't have an episode of Mad Men in the countdown. I was like, no. I just can't have any episode from the final season of Mad Men in the countdown. Because that's what actually, Kevin, that's when we actually kicked off our podcast covering Mad Men. Like the first 4 STVD podcasts were only based on Mad Men. And then, I think by the 5th one, we started like adding other shows, even though it was still focused on Mad Men. And then we realized, hey, cause it was when they split it into 2 halves for season 7. Once that first half of season 7 was done, we were like, oh, I guess we're going to cover everything else now. Hey, Game of Thrones is on. Let's talk about that. And then, 18,000 other shows. So, the only other real major rule was that no TV series could have more than one episode in the countdown. So you don't get multiple episodes of The Sopranos or The Wire or whatever else made the top 20, or now it's become a top 25. I'll explain that later. But anyway, I put it all together. Voila, the countdown was born. See, the disclaimer, it gets longer and shorter every fucking time. So let's get to Mad Men. That's why we're here. My warning is, this is the part where I give a hopefully brief history lesson about the series before we get into our general early remembered impressions and all that sort of thing. We'll be diving further into the series, the characters, the seasons, and all the different notable and noteworthy aspects of Mad Men before we actually get around to, as I would say, unpacking the suitcase. Yeah.
Let me cross that pun off my notebook.
Oh, trust me, it's going to get reused. We're recycling that fucker. We do get to curse on this podcast if you like. So feel free to drop a duty bomb or whatever. So Kevin, although I'm going to try to drill down just to the bare essentials, obviously, especially with your background. Oh, I forgot to ask, how long have you been at AMC for?
I started the week of the Breaking Bad finale, so it was the fall of 2013.
Gotcha. Oh, an interesting time to begin your tenure there.
It really was. It was nice because I was there for the Emmy the next year. But that meant I think I was only there for one full season of Mad Men. It was 7A and 7B.
Yeah, that's right. Right, because it came back for the first part of season 7 in I think April of 2014. That's when our podcast started. So obviously, if you catch anything, if there's anything that if I misspeak or you got anything to add, feel free. It's not going to derail me. It just means I might have to switch tracks, kind of thing. Ooh, train puns now. Wow. Anyway, so here we go. History time. Mad Men obviously ran on AMC. Hey, remember when it was really unusual to call it AMC, that we just were so used to calling it American Movie Classics?
Movie Classics, yep.
Anyway, I digress. Although one of these days I am going to ask, you should see if they have old promo art for AMC over the years because AMC was one of my clients, and I actually negotiated and even helped with the selection process for images that got used for some of their more expensive and notable ads that they did back in the day. And I kind of wish I had like tear sheets just to have just as mementos from them. I just don't have them anymore. I should ask you to, basically go through the files there. Anyway.
For the network?
For the network.
Huh.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I didn't work I worked with the ad agency. I was working on behalf of the network. Obviously, because AMC isn't doing it themselves. It was kind of, I think it was through, good Lord, it's like through some Pennsylvania, ad agency, called Red Tedimer or something like that. But we're talking many years ago. These were ads that involved oh, look, it's Audrey Hepburn and Julia Roberts together in the image, or Denzel Washington and Sidney Poitier together in the image, whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those were all from the company that I worked for back in the day. And I had to work out the deals for them. And I actually had to run to Julia Roberts' office several times to try to convince her publicist to convince her to give the okay, because she didn't want to do it. And it was a whole freaking thing. She signed the okay as she was getting on an airplane at 5 a.m. I found out, early the next morning. Because these were the days where if you're doing like a $35,000 or $40,000 sale back then, nowadays, that would be like if I'm not in that business anymore, but it would be like doing like a $200,000 or $300,000 sale because it's such a big deal. So,
yeah.
But of course, everyone assumes I met Julia Roberts, and I didn't, but I always lie and say, oh, yeah, sure, of course I did. Because, that always happens that way. That's how it works.
It counts, yeah.
Idiots. Okay, so where was I? Mad Men. Oh, this... See how I digress? Mad Men, it ran on AMC. It ran there from 2017 to 2015, totaling 7 seasons and 92 episodes. Now, the series was created by, this came up before. I always forget. I corrected the person I was talking to, and now I forgot it myself.
Weiner.
It is Weiner. Okay, thank you. The series was created by Matthew Weiner, an alumnus from the impressive stable of writers from The Sopranos, just like Terrence Winter or Todd Kessler. In fact, he had actually written the original spec script for Mad Men years earlier. That was back when he was still a staff writer on that old Ted Danson sitcom, Becker. One of those better than you actually thought it was kind of sitcoms. And it wasn't bad. A decent cast. And David Chase had actually hired him for The Sopranos based on reading that Mad Men script. Now, Weiner, he did try to sell the script, try to get the thing made. Because it was, of course, as we all know, about the lives and loves and hates of men and women of an advertising agency in the 1960s. But it was trying to sell it to, some of the high-end pay cable providers, like obviously HBO and Showtime. But they all passed. And it would be at least a few more years before AMC... This is right around when they decided that they wanted to get into the more of the episodic series game, and Mad Men became the first original dramatic series for AMC.
Right.
No, and knowing that you were here, I want to make sure I didn't screw any of that up, because I did realize, they did have some original scripted series back in the 90s. And I went, remember when?
Yeah, remember when, and then. The first drama they commissioned was The Prisoner, the remake with Jim Caviezel.
Oh God, I was not a big fan of that. I apologize.
No, nobody was.
Yeah, and that was way before we found out that Jim Caviezel is a total lunatic. But anyway,
yeah.
Thanks for ruining Person of Interest for me, Jim. Anyway. AMC did plunge forward, and just a month or two after The Sopranos actually ended on HBO, that's when Mad Men premiered that summer in 2007. Oh, and just to puff you up a little bit here, I always like pointing out that Breaking Bad premiered almost exactly 6 months later. So that is a really especially impressive time in the history of AMC with those two iconic shows 6 months apart. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it's a weird coincidence. Both series racked up exact 16 Emmys wins each over the years. I think they both have the same number, which is kind of strange, but it just works out that way.
I'll trust your math. Yeah.
Hey, if I'm wrong, that means someone's actually was listening and what someone wants to point out, hey, you actually listened this far? Wow, you're amazing. So let's get into our own perspectives here. Now, Kevin, considering where you work, I'm thinking you might have a more interesting POV at the time this series premiered, or maybe not when it premiered, but over the years since. So I was going to say, what was your memories of when you watched it then and how you just felt about it overall before because I actually don't have much to say in this part.
Yeah. I feel like I was one of the really, really early viewers, but not really the exact first wave. So my mom and her sisters were essentially Peggy's age. They're born early 40s. I think Peggy's born 39 or 40. My mom was 44, grew up in New York City, had very much the same early 20s life. So when that came on, that generation of my family just went bananas. And after hearing about it for 4 weeks, I think AMC did a marathon on Labor Day weekend. Mm-hmm. So it might have been leading up to the finale. And I just TiVo'd the whole thing and blew through it. And I think watched the finale live. And still, you were hearing about it, but it didn't really explode until DVD, I would say.
Right.
And then by the time the second season premiered, everybody was sitting down and watching.
Right. And I think, I think right from the very first season, they qualified, and that was when they started to win those Emmys that we were talking about. Didn't they win for the first season? Or am I mistaken? It was the second season.
Did they? It might have been the second. I feel like that first season might have been the Homeland year. Oh. But somebody will have to look that up.
I can do that while you're talking. It's just amazing.
I could be wrong.
It's just amazing. Well, I will throw it to you to either right or I am looking right now because now I am curious because I'm the idiot who see. It's funny how much I write in my notes and then I just totally go off and come up. I derail my own podcast time and time again. All right, here we go. Let's see. Primetime Emmy Awards winner. All right, so here we go. It won for... there's a Primetime Emmy Awards of 2008. This is and since it won for cinematography and art direction for Smoke Gets in Your Eyes, hairstyling, main tile design, outstanding drama series.
Oh,
it did win that first year. It also won for writing for the pilot as well. So,
thanks.
Save the podcast. No. Anyway.
All right, I'll turn in my ID.
Homeland. Oh, you should know. I don't know if I've told you this. One of the. Why would I have told you this? I think it might have been our first year of the podcast, first or second year, I don't remember. These were the days where occasionally we might have a goofy title for the podcast. Most of the time we didn't, but every once in a while we did. And I don't remember, even today, I don't actually remember why both myself and my co-host Dan, why we had such antipathy towards Homeland at this point. I remember just thinking, okay, the show has run its course, stop it already. But there must have been some reason I was angry about it. So we actually titled the title of the podcast was Fuck Homeland. I'd have to go back and listen to understand why did we say that? I don't remember what, did they win an award that we thought someone else should have won? Is that's the only thing I can think of.
You know what I think it is? It's the reason that for one of the sales videos, we had to say AMC won 6 of the last 7 best drama series Emmys. I think AMC had it 6 years running between Mad Men and Breaking Bad. Or they had it 5 years running, and then the 6th year Homeland got it, and then Breaking Bad got the 7th one.
All right, that's got to be it. We must have just been angry that Homeland won that, which is funny because he doesn't. Because unlike me, Dan's more highly involved when it comes to awards, and he doesn't care about awards. He thinks they're all stupid. Well, up until the last year or so, I actually did care about awards. Yeah. Thank you, COVID. Wow. Here's the funny thing, Mr. Memory over here. The weird thing is, I do not actually remember for sure. I want to say I watched it from the get-go. I really do. And I suspect I might have even had a similar situation to what you were describing. I have this vague memory of watching kind of like a marathon to catch up on it. Yeah. But I do think I watched it from fairly early on, so it might have even been during that very first season. I do not remember for sure. I don't, because usually there has to be there has to be a story behind why I'm going to remember something. Like I have a very distinct memory of when I started watching Breaking Bad for a specific reason. Or the shows that I gave up on and then went back to, so it becomes a story. But Mad Men, I don't seem to remember. And you'd think a show that there's been over 60 hours worth of conversation about it on this podcast, I would remember something as simple as that. Maybe I should have went back to listen to our very first podcast. Maybe I say it there, because I would have remembered back in there. I don't know. So anyway, it's just, for me, from the get-go, when I first watched it, I was just enthralled with it, or enthralled with it, I guess I should say. Yeah. I'm a sucker for period things. And even though this is kind of pushes that a little further, because it's the 60s, because I'm usually, you give me anything in the 30s and the 40s, I'm there for it. Even the 50s, I'll take. The 60s, like, Yeah. But because it was 1960 at the beginning, I was like, oh, it still has that kind of 50s feel, the look, whatever. And there was something so gloriously cinematic about everything, especially when you watch that very first episode. So it just sucked me in right from the start, Yeah,
that first episode was shot in New York, and then once the pilot sold, everything moved to LA. So that's why you see there's like a beautiful crane shot over the sidewalk. Yes. And you never see anything like that again.
Right. It's funny. When I was doing my, I did like a mini binge rewatch of the show. I think I pre-selected like 20, 21 episodes to watch. And when I was watching the pilot again, that is one of the things that struck me. I was like, I don't remember them ever doing anything like that. And I realized it had to be why. Because, I know the bulk of the show, I don't mean maybe all the show, I guess, was shot in Los Angeles, right?
Yep. Yeah. After the pilot.
Right. Interesting. Because, it's not like we had any studio space here in New York. No, of course. I'm just kidding. Not anymore. See, that's why instead of having all these Law and Order actors on, there's all these CW actors that are on the Mad Men over the years. It's very strange. But I'm going to be bringing that up later. So, anyway. So, there were a number of things that struck me, not just watching the pilot, but just doing the rewatch. Like, obviously, the first thing I usually think of when I think of Mad Men is I think about the quality of the writing. And we all, anyone who's a fan of the show, you're all familiar with the great dialogue and lines throughout the run of the series. But here's something, I don't know if I've actually ever said this before, even with all the 60 hours of conversation. I don't think there's any other dramatic series, even close, that has nearly as many just sharply cutting, delightfully mean, subtle or not so subtle, sarcastic put downs and just mean, just out and out mean behavior towards verbal behavior towards each other as Mad Men. It's the ruthless verbal assaults that are levied. They're levied by everybody on this show. Did you notice? Yeah. It's a weird phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about our favorite insults, but there are just so many appropriate GIFs or GIFs, if you prefer, that are perfect for so many reasons in like a work chat, like whether it's I don't think that you at all, or of course you're a very gifted storyteller.
Oh my God! It's when you, and it's funny because you initially, if you initially mention that to someone who's watched it, of course they'll think of the obvious people and the obvious characters, like, because, Roger is written to be extremely witty and certainly Don has his moments, whatever. It's like, no. every character, at least every major and medium level character has multiple moments. It's just, and they're brutal. They're the kind of things that if you said it to your own friend, you'd be like, really? you might not be friends anymore. I mean, ugh. I sometimes I kind of imagine there would be a contest in the writer's room, like for each episode, who come up with the most withering witticisms per episode. I mean, God, they must have, I mean, when they started having Peggy and Stan on the show alone, it's like, oh, we're going to have fun here. Mm-hmm. Even right up to the end, where they're basically about to be falling in love, they're still being like, oh my God, did you just say that to him? Oh my God. Just really, you know what? I wish I had thought about it, because something it would have been funny to come up with like a top 10 list of favorite put downs, whatever, but I didn't think to do that. The one that always sticks with me, and it wasn't part of my rewatch, but it's the one that always has lodged itself into my brain, is that great moment, between Don and Ginsberg in the elevator. When Ginsberg says all this stuff to him about, thinking about whatever, and Don's like, I don't think about you at all.
Oh, yeah.
I was, that's just perfect.
Beautiful. Just, that ruined his weekend.
Yeah. I don't know. That probably drove him crazy. Literally. Anyway. But do I have a rim shot on this? Oh, I do. Anyway, so happy to be part of the cheesiest podcast around, aren't you? So, of course, once you get beyond the writing, then of course, what's the next thing people will talk about? It's obviously the cast, the acting, and obviously a lot of that is also due to the scripting of the series, because I think there's a number of actors, and I just hinted at this with the CW reference, and now I'm going to bring it to the fore here. There's a number of actors who appeared on the series and they're like great on the show. And then when you see them on a lesser TV show, you might not think quite as much of them as a thespian, and you realize, sometimes it is about the words. And I don't mean to beat up on the CW, because I'm actually talking about the CW DC shows, because I'm actually a fan of them. I know. I still watch most of them. I've defended them from their detractors, but I also, obviously, I'm going to acknowledge they're clearly a few rungs down on the quality ladder or whatever. But when you look at a character like Katie Lotz, for example, I can't remember if it's Lotz or Lutz. I'm going to say Lutz. She's all, people who are familiar with the DC stuff. She's Sarah Lance. She's, from Arrow and Legends of Tomorrow, and she's fine, but whatever. But she's Stephanie, the girl in California, mm-hmm. who appears in a bunch of notable Mad Men episodes, including this one, including the finale, and you realize, really? That's the same one? Well, the woman who plays Faye in season 4, Carla Bono, I think. You can find her hamming it up in like season 5 of Supergirl, this weird ancient alien intergalactic. I don't know what the fuck she's supposed to be in that one. She's pretty kind of annoying and awful in it. But it's like, but you were so good as Faye. And they realize, oh, you know what? Sometimes it is about the words on the page. But one of the things that struck me in the rewatch was also how better I realized some of the actors were than I originally would have given them credit for. So I thought that's kind of an interesting thing to realization to have. It's kind of like when an actor, it's not just when they're delivering a line, but they're just doing so much with their expression, their eyes, the kind of, either maybe they're searching for the truth, or maybe they already know the truth. And the person I think the most of when I'm saying something like that, January Jones is much better than I think I've ever given her credit for. As much as I have defended the character of Betty a number of times over the years, but she's actually a lot better than I think I realized. I think even 5 or 6 years ago that I realized she was. She's really good on this series.
She is, and she was so damn young.
Oh, she's absurdly young when you think about it. Because she was, was she like 20? She
was like 28.
Was she 20? I thought she was like, she might have even been younger than 28, but something like that. I don't have it in front of me. So 27, 20. The only reason I have a vague memory of it is on another one of our podcasts back that we did back in February. Our podcast number 300, actually. I headed up an imaginary segment where we recast certain television series if they were made in a totally different year. So I imagined, Mad Men starts off in 1960. What would the casting have been like if they had cast Mad Men in 1960? And I tried to get approximations on age, so I looked up how old like John Hamm was at the time, and then tried to find someone close. And the same with with Betty and Peggy and whatever. What did I cast for? It might have been Tippi Hedren. I might have cast Tippi Hedren for her.
Yeah, okay.
Might have been. I'm sure it was some Hitchcock blonde. I'm just assuming it was her. I can't remember for sure. And also another person, Christina Hendricks, another person I probably did not give as much credit for their acting ability when I watched it in the past. And that's not to say I didn't like them, but it's like they both have, just in the episodes I watched, they have a number of scenes where you can just feel the wheels turning behind their eyes when they're giving someone a look at something. And I think that's a really special quality when you can pull it off convincingly. It's really impressive.
Yeah, they know that in that decade, it is not their place to say something, but boy, do they want to say it.
Oh, well, especially, on one hand, especially with the Christina Hendricks character, because of what she's had to deal with, even though she does tend to be more outspoken, but it's interesting that she still has to go through what she goes through, even right up until the very end of the series, of course.
Yeah.
And I don't think one can talk about the acting on the show without giving a nod to John Hamm himself. Because look, we know the guy is a good looking dude who can handle both drama and comedy better than most people can. I thought it was a revelation when we realized how funny he actually was when we saw him on other TV series. But the thing I would point out, is there, at least over the last 15 years, is there a better actor who can genuinely play all the different degrees of drinking and alcoholism the way John Hamm has done? Especially in the episode we're going to be talking about tonight. I mean, from a slight buzz to fall down drunk, and also credit to the hair and makeup people on Mad Men because they do an amazing job. It's like, let's just sweat you up just a little bit. Let's get that hair just slightly mussy, whatever.
But a tiny bit of puke.
We'll get to that puke, the puke metaphor. But it's one of those things where I think we've both seen a million movies and TV shows with actors and characters being drunk, whatever, and quite often done very well. But considering how big a part of this character that is, and how he's handled it throughout the course of the series, and then when you get to specific episodes like The Suitcase or the episode right before The Suitcase, Waldorf Stories, which it's one of those things when you watch it and it's like, it really, again, I know we're not supposed to care about awards, but he should have won an Emmy before he had finally won one. He really should have gotten one. I think, if I'm not mistaken, because I think This Is the Season I thought he should have won for, and I think this might have been the year that they gave it to Kyle Chandler for Friday Night Lights.
Ooh.
I think it was this season, the fourth season. Because there was a season like, it's got to be John Hamm. He did such an amazing... And again, I like Friday Night Lights, and I like Kyle Chandler. But I was like, really? Really? Yeah. It's like, sure. So, the other thing, when we talk about a show like Mad Men, we usually get into things about the characters. And one of the things I think that Mad Men does that I think it shares with upper echelon series like Breaking Bad, of course, or say The Sopranos or The Wire. And I think Mad Men does it more often again, more often than almost any other series does. Maybe Sopranos does. It's kind of like what I was saying about the dialogue, about the mean, nasty cutting things. They are not afraid to have people to not just be flawed, but sometimes just be downright reprehensible. That your major character that you're following week after week can actually be awful people. And unlike all those other shows I just mentioned, like your Breaking Bad, Sopranos, or The Wire, these are not like murderous felons.
No.
They're just regular people. Regular people who do awful things.
Awful things.
I mean, especially if you think about, I mean, the main ones I think that come to mind before any others tend to be the polarizing characters like Betty and Pete. If I had a dollar for every time I defended Betty and Pete, I wouldn't be wasting my time recording a podcast. I can tell you that. But it's you know what I mean? It's just it's one of those things where I think it's always very gutsy, because one of those rules you're supposed to have with, you know, TVs and movies is, you know, about keeping the characters likable and relatable, whatever. It's like, no, I think the fact that they're not always likable is, to me, what makes them relatable. That's how I view it.
Yes. Yeah. It's not about watching them do good all the time. It's about watching them struggle with something, and maybe the thing they choose is not the thing a nice person would choose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's nice about it is, you know, it's all about shades of gray, you know, and, you know, any one of these characters, they could have positive qualities, but sometimes, you know, their darker nature wins out, or sometimes, you know, hey, you know what? People can be selfish. You know, people can be awful at times. We're all guilty of that. All these characters, especially ones that run, you know, that are on from the beginning to the end of the series, that's not to say they don't have their own redemptive moments or events that, despite, you know, we might dislike some of their misdeeds, or however you want to phrase it, we can still empathize with them. We can still relate to them at other times. I will admit, every once in a while, it can be difficult. Pete, you know, I was doing so good defending you for like several seasons, and then you did that one thing, and I was like, oh, that was a real tough one. And even though both the actor Kartheiser and Matthew Weiner himself said, "Oh, we didn't really intend it that way." It's like, really, you didn't intend it that way? Did you not? Were you not aware of what you were doing?
Which incident in particular? You can give me a hint.
The kind of the rapey one.
Oh, that one.
That's to me, that's the tough one. And to be clear, that was hard to defend back when it aired. Now, you know, in the era of woke and Me Too and this, that, and the other thing, ooh, now you don't even want to defend it, because that, and also what he does with I find him to be obviously clearly mainly responsible for what Joan has to do. Well, she doesn't have to do it, but you know, it
wouldn't have happened without him there.
Yeah, but it just, you know, but there's so much I really love about Pete. You know, I try to defend him because, you know, people say, "Oh, but he's a fucking obnoxious asshole." It's like, yeah, I'm sorry, you don't know anyone like that?
Yeah.
Either be in your office or just among your friends? Come on. And what's great about, and I've said it before, what's great about that character is he can have these horrible qualities and these moments where you're just like, oh, he's the kind of guy you just want to punch in the face, kind of, the way I feel about like Matt Smith on The Crown or something. I hate him on The Crown. But Pete has great moments on the show too. You know, he's, and quite frankly, when it comes to the ad agency business, I would say from season 1 all the way through to season 7, he's actually the smartest one. He's the one who seems to be the most, have the best foresight for things coming. And I think that's even mentioned at one point on the show. I think, Don actually acknowledges, the fact that Pete was ahead of the game and saw things that other people didn't see, you know, as far as certain markets and so on. I do think that happens, if I'm not mistaken. Might have been in one of the episodes I did on the rewatch.
He's one of the few characters where, that TV character thing where, like with House, it's like, oh, he's an asshole, but what a great doctor. Or Don, it's like, oh, he's a loose cannon, but some of these creative ideas. Pete Campbell, anytime you see him working, you're like, oh, that's why he has his job.
Exactly. That's exactly it. Because at a certain point, it's like, he even, if I'm not mistaken, he even admits himself early on, at least initially when he's first starting, that he's not great with people. He certainly gets that way over time. He certainly gets better at that over time. You see, he becomes your classic schmoozy, you almost want to take a shower after you watch a scene with him with a client, quite frankly. But it's an interesting phenomenon with that character. And also when you consider, and I don't want to spoil too much because I do have friends who are listening to this podcast who haven't finished the series yet. It's especially interesting when you think about how his character's storyline eventually ends. It's like, interesting. Well done. Matthew Weiner, another curveball, you bastard. And Betty's the other one like that, because Betty can also be at times a little hard to defend. Not as bad as Pete, I don't think.
Yeah.
Because usually the knock on Betty is, oh, she's not a good mother. I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to say she's the best mother, but I can think of a lot of worse mothers I've seen on TV over the years. And quite frankly, no one really has a great mom on Mad Men over the course of this history, as far as I can recall. I mean, those who actually have moms at all, quite frankly. Pete's mom ain't a bargain. Neither is Peggy's. So
no, she's rather unpleasant.
Right. But with Betty, it becomes more about, well, it's how she was brought up, and, you can see the lessons and what she was taught and how she transferred them to her kids. And, is she sometimes a bit more about herself than anything else? Yeah. Okay. I'd say that's fair, although Sally can be a handful. And you know what? Don wasn't the greatest husband. Let's not forget that. So with this talking of, different characters, I just figured I'd get one of these basic baseline kind of questions out of the way. I mean, who are among if you had to come up with a couple of your more favorite characters on the show over the course of the time, and it can be major characters, or if you just want to pull one out of a hat, who showed up in one episode, be my guest, I don't care. I'm just curious. I
have kind of three weird ones, and they're all outsiders. And number one is Lane Price. I've always loved Jared Harris. This was shortly after he had a great streak on Fringe. And I was so happy to see him pop up on this. And he's just so watchable and a really fascinating character who just kind of makes this spur-of-the-moment life decision that has far-reaching effects for his family and everybody's future. And then the other outsider, Jim Cutler, Harry Hamlin's character.
That's an interesting choice.
There's just this charisma to him where I've seen people like him where they sort of just play it really, really safe. And they're he'll never say something too controversial, but then he'll have an opinion on something and just drop it in there like a little nuke that nobody realizes went off for a while. But then the guy that I love to hate, because I've seen too many people like him, is Lou Avery.
Excellent choice.
Because he's the new guy that comes in, and in order to prove that he needs to be there, he will put his fingerprints on something, whether or not it improves it, just for the sake of being able to say he affected the end product. Right. And I hate that way of working. So I was like, know exactly who that is in my office.
The Lou Avery choice is an inspired choice, by the way.
Thank you.
Hadn't even thought of him, but we talked about him quite a bit when we were covering the final season of Mad Men. And also just the fact, if I'm not mistaken, that's the actor Alan Havey, who basically I know is more of a comedian. You know, he used to host this weird Friday night show that was on like I think before when comedy, I don't know if it was called Comedy Central yet. It might have been what Comedy Central was before it was Comedy Central, like Comedy Channel or whatever the heck it was called. And he had this weird little late night show that was on. I don't think it was just Fridays. It might have been Monday through Friday. And it was just, it was basically just a couple steps up from public access, quite frankly. But that's kind of what lent to the charm of it. It's kind of like watching like Mystery Science Theater had that kind of charm about it, whatever. And the thing that I remember was most significant about it for me personally. Wow, it's going to show both how old I am and just now I'm showing off my TV history knowledge. The night the final Carson aired, which for people who were around at that time and you were of TV watching age, that was a major TV moment, historic TV moment. Johnny Carson's last show. I was watching, and I remember I flicked it because he would be on for like from 11:30 to midnight or whatever it was, and I flicked over, and his whole thing was he just turned the chair, and the studio just went dark for the entire episode.
Jesus.
He was just going to watch. He said, that's what everyone's going to be watching. That's what we're going to be watching too. So basically, if you'd switched over to what was Comedy Central, whatever it was called back then, it was basically just a chair turned to the side and a darkened room because he was watching the Tonight Show like the rest of the world was that night. And I always thought, that's some ballsy. That's just great. I just love that they did that. You know,
Wow.
Obviously I was watching Carson, so I didn't stick around. It's like, did they break for commercials and keep coming back to a dark room? I'm kind of curious. Anyway.
Yeah, they must have.
Yeah. It's just the balls to do that. It's just great. You know, they could just, I mean, obviously they could just run a rerun because they know no one's going to be watching this, but you know, I just love that he did that. So when I saw him show up on Mad Men as that character, and then when the character turns out to be a real prick, it was like, oh, he's great. You know, even though, and that's actually a good example because there's a lot of really crummy, lousy things about Lou. But then there are some actually decent things. Like, he's actually right about his dealing with Don at times. Because, Don, at that point. And he is, like, a big fan of Peggy's and and thinks that she should be able to handle things, if I recall. So.
Yeah, he's very nurturing.
Yeah, he's got his positives, but what you said is really more. He's also a ridiculous cartoonist, so I remember that too. Well, it's funny. I had 3 in mind as well. We're actually going to cross the streams for one of our choices because I also have Lane Price as one of my 3. Again, I can't, I don't want to say too much because I don't want to spoil certain friends. Let's just say I think he has the best. Oh, well, that's not him. Sorry. I think he's just such an extraordinary actor. Like what you were saying with Fringe and other things we've seen. But he can play such a range of characters and emotions. You know, whether it have been his work on Fringe or when he was in Chernobyl. And there's so many things I've seen him in over the years. And, you know, just a side note, because so I do have a little bit of bias here. I don't want to say friends would be pushing it. I'll just say acquaintances. I'm acquaintances with his wife, Allegra, who he married several years ago. Like we've actually texted each other over the last year. Only once. we met through a mutual friend. We were hanging out one time years ago, and it turns out me and her. Oh, you'll actually appreciate this. She's a big fan of karaoke.
Did not know that.
We spent the night talking about karaoke, and then there was some other night she actually texted me, to invite me out, but it would have been some big hoity-toity place in the city, and I look all schlubby. I have no money. I can't go. And I was like, no, I'm sorry, I can't make it because I just didn't want to embarrass myself. Even though I kept wondering, if your husband's going to be there, I might go, but I know he wasn't going to be there. So that's why I picked Lane Price. No, anyway, beyond that, since I love that you went outside the box, I'll just stay conveniently in the box here. I gotta go with the first two names in the ad agency. I gotta go with Sterling and I gotta go with Cooper.
Okay.
I just think Roger Sterling, I think he might be the funniest person on the entire series. I mean, there's no one who gets as many great lines on the show, and some of the more ridiculous moments on the show. Everything from blackface to LSD trips and everything else. And that mustache, good Lord. Oh boy, that alone. And Cooper, I always love the casting of Robert Morse. Because, he's someone who goes back a ways. I remember seeing him in a bunch of movies from like the 60s, if I recall. And he's just one of those characters who just got that excellent, sage words, throughout the series. And this is what I meant to say before. See, I got ahead of myself in my own notes. Again, not going to spoil it for a couple friends of mine. He has the best character exit of any character in the series. I'll just leave it at that. They'll know it when they get there. So the next thing I wanted to kind of pick your brain about, because you're a student of TV the way I am, at least to some degree. I think you may be smarter. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
But you got Don. I was thinking about this when I was doing the rewatch, because obviously outside of the ad agency, and I should mention, just popped into my head just now. I think another reason why I personally got hooked into Mad Men is because I was dealing with ad agencies a lot throughout those years. So so any bit of terminology, whatever, I totally understood, even though obviously a lot of stuff that they're doing was kind of antiquated by the time we got to my time. But I actually went from prints and transparencies and negatives to digital. I bridged that gap. So it was kind of interesting watching Mad Men, and it's like, oh yeah, I remember getting mock-ups and things like that. Oh, that story, yeah, that's great. Anyway, back to what I wanted to talk about. So TV. I'm watching the show, and obviously outside the stuff at the agency, one of the focuses of the show has always been the couple of Don and Betty. And what they go through. And I was watching with fresh eyes, and for some reason, I started to think in my mind, I started to compare them and try to figure out who do they remind me more of, that I was paralleling, so to speak, other famous, TV spouses, and more dramatic. I'm not getting into I'm not talking about Everybody Loves Raymond or anything like that. Although that would be kind of an interesting name. But I'm thinking, compared to say Walter and Skyler on Breaking Bad or Tony and Carmela on The Sopranos. And I think there's a weird parallel to be drawn, and maybe it's because Weiner comes from The Sopranos. There's something about them that kind of reminds me a little bit of Tony and Carmela, Do
you think it's a dependency thing?
I think that's definitely one aspect. Absolutely.
Yeah, because Betty, she was an actress. Was it at an audition that Don meets her?
Yes, I believe so. I think
something or other. And so she was just like January Jones. She was super young and just married into this. I guess Don was already very stable at that point, if not flourishing. So she married directly into that. She mentions having a shitty apartment once. She probably didn't even live out the entire lease before she got married. And then you have Carmela, who lives pretty much a life of luxury, turning that blind eye to where the money's coming from. But spoiler for season 4 of The Sopranos, she's
No, the Sopranos we can spoil. Don't worry about that. I'm just being, you know what? I'm being overly cautious.
Oh, for these particular viewers, yes.
And meanwhile, they're probably not even going to listen to the podcast, but I'm just being a little careful. I know they're well into season 5 right now, so I'm trying to avoid specifics about the final season until later. When I make it a specific segment, then we can talk all we want about it if we want. Anyway, go on.
The prospect of Carmela being single again is less than appealing.
Right. And also they're both characters who are initially, if they're not in denial, the fact that they almost seem so blissfully unaware or work hard to be unaware of their husband's infidelities. Because even when they're confronted with things that are kind of like, they work hard not to think that way, but then they can't help it. I think there's scenes of both of these characters going through closets or sniffing clothing or finding evidence of things of that nature, And again, it's like, you didn't know that when you were, Oh, and they both have a boy and a girl. Just realized it. Older daughter, younger son. Interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But then again, I feel that's one of those weird common TV tropes. Is like, like Homeland. Didn't Damon Lewis's character, older girl, younger son? Anyway.
One boy, one girl. Yeah.
Bloodline, they all do it. Anyway, and we never care about the son. We only care about the daughter. It's always the every show. We'll just have 15 Bobbies. No one will notice. Anyway. But, the reason why I think they're more like Tony and Carmela than, say, Walter and Skyler, mainly because I think Walter and Skyler just are just different in so many ways. Because Walter becomes something,
there's so much more of a partnership, their marriage.
Yeah,
especially in the flashbacks when you see them, they're looking at their house for the first time, and it feels like they're on such an equal playing field with each other. Right.
Whereas even when either the marriage of the two characters, whether it be Tony Carmela or Don and Betty, whether that's at the center of the show or not quite at times, it always is running parallel to what the focus of the show is as far as like the main character, as far as Don or Tony. So if the dissolution of the marriage between Don and Betty is also emblematic of Don's, spiraling downward, starting to spiral downward at that point, and how he's not on top of things the way he was at work, and things are starting to get away from slightly. Obviously, that speeds up and becomes much more so over the course of the next few seasons. I think that also kind of starts to happen with Tony on The Sopranos. He's reached this elevated position finally, whatever. But stuff is starting to crumble beneath him. He's starting to, whatever. And it's also at the same time as his marriage is starting to fall apart. The difference is he kind of rights the ship, or she decides just to, to deal with things. Whereas Betty, to her credit, doesn't. She's like, nope. No, that's enough. I'm out of here. Goodbye. So in a weird way, even though one might not have thought this, because, it's Betty, she's more about being vain, she's this pampered housewife in the 60s, whatever, she actually ends up showing up a stronger streak, and being fiercer than Carmela was. Because she does leave Don. And Carmela doesn't leave Tony. She threatens to. They fight. They talk to the lawyers and they go through all that stuff. Almost, and they also deal with therapy. They also have weird ways of dealing with therapy, I should mention.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that.
Oh yeah.
Early therapy visits with the debrief at the end.
Don. Actually, I remember watching the first season. I remember thinking, I'm very used to, like almost any other viewer, or especially male viewers, we tend to give the main character, the dude who's the main character, a break, even though he's clearly cheating on his spouse all the time. Because, now, by the way, a difference with Walter White, never cheats on her. You know? Skyler might cheat.
That's
but
true.
But all these other, if you think about it, you start going through the list of all like the major shows and the character. It's like, you know, obviously Tony Soprano goes without saying, but Don, I just apologized to the microphone. Don Draper, Vic Mackey, you know, start going through, you know, everyone. It's like, is there anyone who doesn't, you know, screw around on their wife at some point? You know, what? Even Seth Bullock in Deadwood technically does. You know, he does technically cheat on his wife. You know, and it was actually, who's Anna Gunn? Look, all comes full circle. Anyway.
That was beautiful.
I know. This is where the magic happens. Not the magic I used to appreciate here. So putting that aside, a lot of times when we're especially when we're in this countdown, when we're talking about certain series, especially when we're getting to these, you know, these last few really major ones, like the ones, you know, the beloved series, the series that always have, you know, the different fans of different seasons, you know, like when we just did The Wire. And so what part of that conversation had to be what's your favorite season, which has actually becomes a more interesting conversation than it sounds. Believe it or not.
Oh, yeah.
You know, same with Lost, same with Game of Thrones, whatever the show. I don't think we did it for Game of Thrones, did we? No, don't. Nah, probably didn't. Because, you know, I hate the final 3 seasons. No, just kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Mad Men. I was curious, do you have a preferred season in the mix? And if so, why? No, I'm just kidding.
It's this one. It's season 4. But I count the season 3 finale as part of it. Just as an overture to it, the way that ends. Because it's, for pretty much the first time on the show, there's this hope. There's this open future. You know, Don's doing great at his job, but he's not under contract. What is his future? He'll be there forever, for sure. Will he be happy? And then suddenly there's this opportunity to start fresh for him and for the other partners. And we had not seen that yet. But the thing about season 4 as a whole is just there is not a dud among those episodes. And now that I'm thinking back to it, every single week I rewatched that week's episode within about 48 hours. I needed to see each one again. Never did that with any other season.
Well, that is a very solid choice.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, I know. Isn't it nice? Oh, thank you, Scott. Asshole. For me, because I thought about, obviously, you know, I came up with the question, so I thought about it. I was basically thinking, I was basically narrowed it down to a few seasons. I just had to really decide which was the one. And season 4 was one of my possibilities, you know, and for some of the reasons that you just mentioned as well. But it's kind of like the run from like, and again, I love season 1 also, but it's more the run from 2, 3, and 4, which really, grabs me. But at the end of the day, for me, it's season 3. I think, and kind of like how you mentioned how when you talk about season 4, but it's the end of season 3 is kind of the overture to that. The same thing happens with the end of season 2 for season 3. Season 2 ends with the whole introduction of the Brits and, you know, the Powell and Lowell storyline, which is now going to continue to be a huge part of season 3. And season 3 also gives us, Lane Price. So that was a major reason. But the events of, you know, whether it be the torturous revealing exposure of Don's identity to Betty, which is just such an episode. And you feel so bad for that girl who got left in the car. But I also use season 3 more than the first 2 seasons to point out the moment, if you hadn't realized it yet, the moment that you all should realize Don is not a great guy is when he doesn't stick up for Sal. Because he knows Sal's secret from the beginning of the season. And then later on, he doesn't come to his rescue. He just lets him.
Right. And you think he's going to be okay with it? Because is it season 3 that is the hotel fire?
Yes. That's at the beginning. It's at the beginning of the season when that happens, and then later in the season when Sal gets found out because of the guy from Lucky Strike trying to get him fired, and
right, because Don sees him with the bellhop, and you think Don might let it slide, but he's just saving it.
Yeah, it's just a horrible moment when it happens, and he goes, "Oh, Don," and it's just again. We watch all these shows where the main character is some sort of crook or criminal, whether it be a Walter White or a Tony Soprano or a Vic Mackey or whatever. And sometimes we need to be reminded, the person you're following here and that you may think you're rooting for is not a great person. And there has to be certain moments where you're reminded of that. And you can think of them with each of those aforementioned characters. Sometimes it takes us, like a show like The Shield, I think many of us had forgotten over the course of time, just how bad a person Vic Mackey actually is until we get that huge confessional episode, just towards the end of The Shield, and you realize with the look of horror on the woman's face, listening to him, that's our horror, because we're like, oh God, is this the guy I've been rooting for?
Yeah, we were there for all of that.
Where?
I do like to ask when I find out anybody's watched The Shield, and I do it for Breaking Bad too. I say, when did Vic Mackey lose you? And when did Walter White lose you? Because I think in both cases, by the final frames, you're not with them anymore.
That's a good question. Should have saved it for the next podcast. Spoiler.
Yeah, we're doing The Shield, the episode where Acevedo gets raped. Yeah.
Oof. Oh, there's a TV moment I didn't need to think of at this point in time. Let me think about that. I would say for Walter White, I was one of the people who kind of stuck by him longer than others. But because I know for most people, if he didn't lose you with letting what's her face choke to death, which I know he lost a lot of people with that, didn't lose me, or if he didn't lose you when you realize, oh my God, he's the one who poisoned the kid, didn't lose me.
Yeah,
it was Killing Mike. The stuff with Mike, the stuff with that whole episode and what he did and his actions. I'm like going, what are you doing? No. And that kind of like, God damn it, Walt, I can't. Yeah. And that was where I was like, I think he's kind of, I mean, I would still, when I would talk about him, I still love the character, but now it's like, I can't root for you anymore. I have to, because now your collateral damage has gotten to a point where I can't root for you. I got to root for Jesse to somehow come out of this or something like that. I got to root for Skyler to somehow survive this or something like that. I can't root for you. I was able to root for you when the antagonist was a Gus Fring or this, that, or the other thing, but now you killed Mike. No. Great scene, but still, no. Vic?
Senseless.
Vic is an interesting one. I haven't thought about it in a while because it should have happened much earlier on for me.
Yep.
But
I think if you were to rewatch it in like the current climate, you'd lose him a lot quicker.
Yeah, okay, I could see that. Because no longer is he shielded, no pun intended, by but he's got to catch those guys, so he better beat them up. Right. Oh, I hadn't even thought of it that way. I just feel like it always gets to the point on The Shield where right when I'm ready to like, okay, I really want him to be brought down. Because sometimes you are rooting for the people who are opposed to him because you kind of want them to be proven right, or you want them, they're actually doing the job the right way and whatever. but then someone comes in and they're a worse presence. Like what happens with the Forrest Whitaker character, who initially is a guy you would want to root for, and then he ends up being corrupted by the whole process, and he doesn't almost, I believe he becomes a worse person than even Vic was to begin with. And it's like, oh God, now I got to root for Vic again. So I think with Vic, I kind of flip back and forth, because it was always like another presence where I was like, oh, maybe I can't, whatever. I was always fascinated to watch how he got around things, but I never found myself really actively rooting for him the way I did Walter, you know?
Okay.
So, yeah. And then but I knew that had to come down between him and Shane anyway, because I felt the show was built that way. I've talked about that on another podcast, when the great shows, they create a situation, a relationship at the very beginning, and you realize, it's going to come down to between those two. It has to. The show does not. I don't think the show will successfully fulfill what it should be unless whether it be, The Shield has to come down between Vic and Shane. Breaking Bad has to come down between Walt and Jesse. The Americans has to come down between, the couple, which is the final, basically, which I think was a great move on that show's part, or Justified, and so on. Basically every show that Walton Goggins has ever been on. But anyway, so good question. Back to was I was talking about season 3, right?
Yep.
Because I was talking about Don not being a great guy, and I'll probably talk about it a little bit later as well. The final episode, it's just one of my all-time favorite episodes of the show. It might be my second favorite episode overall. So you put all that together, that's probably why I'd end up picking season 3. But when it's almost like picking between like season 3 and season 4 of Breaking Bad, or a show like that, or 3 and 4 of The Wire. That was one that came up before, and I was positive I was going to be picking season 4, and then I was like, season 3 is really good, mm-hmm. And I think. I can't remember what Brian, he's the guy who co-hosted with me, a frequent co-host here. I think he might have surprised me. He might have picked season 3 over season 4. I don't remember. Anyway, I digress again on the podcast. So, you know what? You actually kind of nutshelled season 4 a little bit there when you were talking about it. But the thing with season 4, as you were saying, because now we're going to finally get to talking about the episode now. Season 4, I feel, is kind of where the cracks really start to show in, I would say, Don's previously, impenetrable veneer that he has. Obviously, just kicked off more in season 3 than what I was just talking about, with the secrets being exposed to Betty, which leads to, his, the divorce, their eventual divorce, whatever. But as we go into season 4, without the tether of his family, even with his, at times, callous disregard of them, quite frankly, Don begins to really be adrift, I think, in season 4, because in the first half specifically, for our purposes, because he's drinking more and more. He's living in a New York City apartment, which is probably not quite up to the Don Draper standards we think he should have at this point. He's seeing prostitutes. Right. He's even breaking his own rules about not sleeping with the help, because he ends up, getting down with one of his own secretaries, I believe. And even leading right up to this episode, he's actually losing time because he's literally blackout drunk, from time to time, which is not a good thing. Last I checked. So as we're getting closer to this episode, we're getting to the point where Sterling Cooper, Draper Price, I like saying the whole name, they've actually won a Clio, which is the annual award given to ad agencies for a TV spot for a glow coat. It's kind of like a mop and glow kind of product. There actually was such a product back in the day, but I don't know if it existed at this point in the 60s.
I feel like there's an actual commercial that the Glow Coat commercial is based on.
I think, yeah, but is it for Glow Coat though? Because I think that kind of went. because that was part of, what's the company? It might be Johnson & Johnson, I think. They had a product that was Glow Coat years earlier, but it kind of merged and became part of like Pledge. So what used to be whatever had like glow in the name became part of their Pledge products, I think. It doesn't matter. I'm just
Got it.
more on our next podcast about the history of America.
Those Clio winners, I hear anybody who has one is just an absolutely wonderful, amazing person.
Is there Have you won a Clio?
I have 2.
You have 2 Clio.
Yeah.
Talk about burying the lead. I asked for your, it's like
I forgot.
It's like if I had Daniel Day-Lewis on and no one knew who he was and he decided not to mention the Oscars and shit. It's like, hello. It should be in your name. I would refer to you as like Clio Award winning.
Yeah. Next time.
That's awesome. I swear to God, if it turns out you have some Emmys as well and you haven't mentioned, I'm going to punch you. Anyway.
I do not.
Okay, good. I mean, not good.
Ask me again in a few months.
Oh, look at you. So, Don is going further down that, like I said, that drunken downward spiral. He actually even drunkenly falls into bed with one woman and wakes up a day later with someone else. The only person who's not celebrating is the person who feels she isn't getting the credit she deserves for all this. That's Peggy Olson. Those are basically the events of the episode leading right up to what we're going to be talking about tonight, which is an episode directed by Jennifer Getzinger, who directed 9 other Mad Men episodes. Hey, as well as a few marvelous episodes of Agent Carter, Daredevil, and Jessica Jones. Hey, I see what I did there. And not to mention, just like Mad Men, I'm kind of obvious sometimes. Not to mention shows that a show I really like Counterpart in a show, not so much, like Westworld. This was written by creator Matthew Weiner. If you dig a little deeper beyond the credits you see on the screen when you're watching it on, a stream or on a DVD, he did get a lot of assistance from staff writers. Thank you, IMDb, like Aaron Levy and Brett Johnson, both of whom actually also worked on the aforementioned Waldorf Stories, the episode I was just talking about, actually, as well as several others. And they also went on to write episodes and produce work for really terrific series like Mindhunter and Counterpart and Good Behavior, which is such a good show that no one watched, and Escape at Dannemora. But, of course, the episode that we are going to be talking about is The Suitcase.
What's wrong? Elevator up?
I think I just broke up with Mark.
Oh. Really?
I think so.
So go home.
Nope. I'm ready to work. You win, again.
You could have just told me it was your birthday.
Right, and there'd be no repercussions.
So now this is my fault?
Well, it's not my fault you don't have a family or friends or anywhere else to go.
Go. Go run to him, like in the movies. You don't have to be here.
I do have to be here because of some stupid idea from Danny, who you had to hire because you stole his other stupid idea because you were drunk.
Don't get personal because you didn't do your work. And by the way, I know it kills you, but guess what? There is no Danny's idea. Everything that comes in here belongs to the agency.
You mean you?
As long as you still work here.
Is that a threat? Because I've already taken somebody up on one of those tonight.
Relax.
You know what? Here's a blank piece of paper. Why don't you turn that into Glow Coat?
Are you out of your mind? You gave me 20 ideas, and I picked out one of them that was a kernel that became that commercial.
So you remember?
I do. It was something about a cowboy. Congratulations.
No, it was something about a kid locked in a closet because his mother was making him wait for the floor to dry, which is basically the whole commercial.
It's a kernel.
Which you changed just enough so that it was yours.
I changed it into a commercial. What, are we going to shoot him in the dark in the closet? That's the way it works. There are no credits on commercials.
You got the Clio.
It's your job. I give you money, you give me ideas.
And you never say thank you.
That's what the money is for. You're young. You will get your recognition. And honestly, it is absolutely ridiculous to be 2 years into your career and counting your ideas. Everything to you is an opportunity. And you should be thanking me every morning when you wake up, along with Jesus, for giving you another day. Oh, come on. I'm sorry about your boyfriend, okay?
I know I could have cut that a little shorter, especially since we're only getting the audio here, but I think it at least has to go all the way to Peggy's racking sobs in the restroom. We'll get to that scene and more in a second.
Yeah.
Actually, I think before we were recording and we were talking the other day, you actually had an interesting little note that you came up with about that scene, as far as the
yes,
something to do with midpoints.
Yeah, I did some math just because the line we just heard, that's what the money's for. I realized it's the crux of the episode, and I realized it's the crux of the season. But then you think about it, if the show is about the dyad of Dawn and Peggy, it could be the crux of the entire series, because she's reaching a certain point of aspiration, and Dawn is reminding her where she is and how far she has to go. So I hit pause, and you see that line is 23 minutes and 26 seconds into the episode, which is the exact halfway point. And this is the 7th episode of the season.
Yeah.
Is that right? So it's the midpoint of the season. But then I went a little farther, and there are 4,403 minutes of Mad Men.
Go on.
That's what the money's for, occurs 2,209 minutes in. That is 50.1% of the way through the show, start to finish. It is the halfway point. That is so important to me. You
know, I can't even mock you doing that, because that's such a Scot thing to have done. I can totally see adding up the minutes. Like, wait a minute. And I was like, well, you know, if you trim out an extra second for the credits each time, that's excellent. That's excellent. I came
at the number a few different ways, because I was like, well, 7B has an extra episode in it, and 713 and 714 are both like 6 minutes longer. But in the absolute grand scheme of things, like actual minutes, it is 50.1%.
That's see. So when people ask me why I had you on, that's pretty much why. Not that AMC business. Pfft, cares about that? Because anyone could have come on and said, "Oh, hey, do you know the suitcase is the midpoint of the series?" Like, yeah, everybody knows that. But does everybody know what you just said? No. I'm pretty sure no one has figured that out.
Never.
Dear Alan Sepinwall, hey, we got one for you, fucker. Take that. All right. Okay. So I watched this a few times for the podcast, and it might be the episode I've seen the most times, period, of Mad Men at this point, because this is the rare instance where an episode showing up in this countdown actually is my favorite episode of the series. In fact, and I might have to talk a little bit about this in a few weeks, this might be, not including like classic TV, like The Twilight Zone or something like that, or I'll just say for dramatic television, this might be my favorite hour of television, or favorite 43 or 44 minutes of television, whatever it is, period. So you'd think I'd have better things to say about it. Anyway, so watching it again, and I didn't go back to listen to how I spoke about it back in 2015, so I'm hoping I'm not repeating something I said back then. I really should have listened. One of the things that struck me as I was watching it and paying attention and just making little notes, whatever, and I picked up on this about 15, 20 odd minutes into it, and I went, wait a minute, are they doing And then I just paid more attention throughout the rest of the episode. And I said, you know, you can actually break this episode down by the 5 stages of grief. And I find that fascinating. I also have an entirely personal and not interesting to anyone other than me reason why I find that interesting, because I'll just say it right now and just get it out of the way. You can see how self-aggrandizing I am here, Kevin. One of the a script that I wrote, which is the one that was supposed to have been made and then wasn't made, and now is sitting on a forever back burner thing, and because I'm not writing anymore, I haven't written while everyone's probably giving up on me at this point. Someone noticed that they said, I realized you went through the 5 stages of grief in this script. I went, what? And I had to go back and read it, which I'd done many times. I realized, oh my God, did I do that without knowing that? And my friend / producer says, that happens all the time with you. You end up being smarter than you think than you realize, because you have things in there you don't realize were there. I was like, oh shit, that's really cool. Oh, anyway, I shouldn't be talking about myself. Talk about Mad Men. Talk about The Suitcase. So let me try to demonstrate this. So obviously, your first stage of grief is denial. So right off the bat with Don, he's choosing not to make that call to California, because he knows what's awaiting for him on the other side of that call. So that's the obvious. And then, of course, we could just take it to its sillier extremes. Because, just to play with the word denial, he also denies Peggy the chance to go out. He denies himself the chance to go see the Liston fight, and so on and so on. So it's all these little things that are playing with, in the early part of the episode with denial. There's no denying that the commercial they came up with for Samsonite was stupid, so he's right on that one. But other than that, it's about denial. What comes next? Anger. Well, what comes next in the episode? The fight with Peggy. That's what the money's for. And all the harsher things he says to her even after that. Do you get a more uncomfortable scene between Don and Peggy? And it's the scene, quite frankly. There's your anger. So then your next stage is bargaining. How do we get bargaining? I'll tell you how we get bargaining. Because this is where, he's trying to make up for things. He starts to try to make up with Peggy. And their back and forth kind of reflects a sense of bargaining. Kind of like his initial insistence that they have, that they do have personal conversations, which she kind of denies. And then she proceeds to open up about what happened with her boyfriend. And then it goes further. What else do you do when you're bargaining? Oh, they go out to eat, and they go out to drink. It's culminates most notably when they talk about Peggy giving up her baby for the first time. Well, which, by the way, outside of the more iconic "that's what the money's for" scene, I think that's actually the most important conversation in the entire episode. Is that moment between them at the bar. But it's stuff like that. And I'm sorry, if you wanted to jump in on that, I shouldn't step on you.
Nope.
Okay.
Please.
Because it's this taboo subject that at that point has never been and we thought could never be discussed. And the fact that they do talk about it in this brief, clipped, but kind of even heartbreaking manner, because you start to, then at that point you're remembering back to when Don saw her in the hospital, in that flashback back in season 2. One of the main things he had said to her was for her to believe that this never happened, but obviously not possible. And she admits that she does think of her child sometimes, and she does it just with one simple word: playgrounds, which is just such that. By the way, that's writing, man. That's just writing. And also the performance, just the way she says it and the way she delivers it. And it's just the right amount of sentiment without it being too much, because it really wouldn't fit her character anyway. But anyway, and I know you folks, you might think I'm digressing. I'm not. The whole point of this is there's a bargaining quid pro quo that keeps going on between them. It's reestablishing and thereby increasing the bond between them. This is also fed by, Don's references to his own military service and his childhood. These are sore topics for someone like Don Draper. So it's kind of like they're exchanging these, hurtful things that they don't talk to anybody else about. And that's, falls under bargaining. What comes after bargaining? Depression. Whew. Well, if you want to get depressed, watch Mad Men. No, I kid. Because, no, I love Mad Men. What is it, 6 Feet Under? But depression. Because after all that, they return to the office. Don immediately gets sick, which would be humiliating for anyone who wasn't already an alcoholic, quite frankly. You'd mentioned before the vomit stain. I kind of look at that. But by the way, love the choice to have that little vomit stain be there for pretty much the rest of the episode.
Yeah.
I kind of look at it as it's almost like a scarlet letter for him, which would also be an A, just like it was for Hester Prynne, but instead of adultery, although he could get one for adultery, I guess. For him, it would be for be A for alcoholic, whatever.
I was thinking it looks literally like a badge.
Yeah, it's badge actually makes more sense than I was going to say. It's like, well, it's like a little vomit flower in his lapel over there. And what follows that? If that's not embarrassing enough, which is really depressing, it's his embarrassing fight with Duck, which he actually loses. What's more depressing than that? But after these, twin towers of humiliating, mortifying, moments in his life, he shrinks back to his office and he essentially curls up to sleep on Peggy's lap. And we all know, or at least I don't know if we all know, but we should know, sleeping, especially at inopportune times, that's pretty much a major sign of depression because he's so deep in his own sadness, And then at that point, I think it's when he sees the ghost of Anna, which is both, it's kind of like the apex of his depression and also kind of what leads him to his acceptance, because that's the final stage, acceptance, which is what happens when he does arise and he makes that phone call. And after he talks to Stephanie in California, when he looks up to see that Peggy's been watching him the entire time, this is the man that nobody else knows so well, he breaks down in tears. That moment is his moment of acceptance of what's happened. So then later in the episode, at the end, when we see that he's looking all clean and pressed, or even if you skip to the next episode, you might think it's possible he's not only accepted Anna's death, but maybe he's actually accepted his own, or taken responsibility for his own drinking problems and that spiral he's been on. And for a moment there, it seems like he has, until he hasn't. You look at the 5 stages of grief, and I think it kind of works. And also it's interesting if you broaden out this episode to look at the two that bookend it. I talked a little bit before about Waldorf's stories, and it's the Summer Man that comes after it. It's interesting how Waldorf's stories, which happens just before this episode, in many ways, at least at this point in the series, shows Don at his lowest. And with the Summer Man, it's kind of like that. It's almost the hopeful feeling, like, oh, Don, he's taking care of himself. He's swimming. I just like he just seems to be in a somewhat. He's trying to take stock of his life. He's trying to be healthier. He's trying to be better emotionally and mentally. And yes, we do know it's short lived, but at least at this moment in time, it's like, oh, we can feel better about Don Draper. If that makes sense.
That is a very solid theory.
Yeah, it's not bad.
Or hypothesis. I don't know what the right word is, but that's worthy of college class right there.
I'll stick to teaching Hitchcock. It's the only thing I know I can do well. So here's where I explain how Saboteur is better than North by Northwest. What? No, I'm kidding. It's not. You had mentioned a little bit before when we were talking about the midpoint. The midpoint minutes of the series, whatever.
Yeah.
But we were talking about Don and Peggy, and I don't think it's just. I'm certainly not alone in thinking this. I would hope in this world that the relationship of Don and Peggy, I think, is the key relationship throughout this series. I more so than any other one, because if you look at it. And if I'm forgetting someone or something, folks out there, feel free to correct me. I think it's the one long-standing male-female relationship that survives from beginning to end, that also remains completely platonic. I know there might be someone who might point out like Joan and Don, but like, no. That doesn't work, because their relationship pretty much fractured after he cost her money. And I never got the impression that actually ever healed, you know. Plus, be honest, their relationship was never really central to the series anyway. But whereas I think Don and Peggy were. And I think it's also interesting that when you get to The Suitcase, which, as you know, we like to point out was, you know, the midpoint of the series, and I could be wrong about this as well, but because I hadn't rewatched all 92 episodes, I only rewatched 21 episodes. I think that scene in The Suitcase when they're at the bar, I think that's the only scene that comes to my mind where there's even a discussion between these two of the possibility of them having ever being together. I know it's talked about in with other people, well, with Peggy at least, but I don't know if Peggy and Don if that ever was a topic ever before or ever since. I'm pretty sure it wasn't.
I think it's the only time. And you mean when she says people suspected he's the father?
Right, that he's the father, or they think that she slept with him to begin with. And
right.
He even makes his comments about her being attracted, whatever. It's kind of like a weird kind. It's one of those. I don't think he was planning to have this conversation ever with her. You know?
Yeah, I am 98% sure you're correct.
Yeah, because obviously, I think from when you go back to season 1, a lot of this is set up to be more of a mentor-student kind of relationship, because he talks about how he sees, you know, a lot of himself in her, because they do have certain similarities at least. Some might try to say it's kind of metaphorically more like a father-daughter relationship, which kind of makes me feel a little queasy when people say that. Only the ages don't quite line up for that, but you could still say a little bit. I don't dismiss it because it works for certain things. Because if I'm not mistaken, when the series starts, I think Don is supposed to be in his late 30s to 40. He's no older than 40, that's for sure. And she's like in her mid to early 20s. I think she's not.
Yeah, she's like 26 or something.
26 or 25. I think when the show starts, she might
be 24, 25.
24, 25, yeah. So, I mean, it's one of those, it could be, but in The Suitcase, the fight that he ends up having with Duck totally feels like it's a father fighting over his daughter's honor to me. Because he doesn't hold off the belt to him until he starts basically calling her a whore for sleep. Oh, again, sleeping with Don, thinking she's sleeping with Don, and acting like sleeping with Don again as though she had before. So even someone that she cared about still thought that way about her, which is interesting. Oh, I thought you were good. I also, finally, the other thing I would say about them is just, I think the most emotionally effective and memorable moments specific to Don and Peggy, from pretty much from this point on, more than any other relationship on the series, just they're the ones I think that really stay with us more. Way more than like almost anything with Don and Betty. I can think of a couple maybe exceptions, but whatever. Don and Megan, or even Don and some stupid random waitress. Don't get me started. Or you should have heard me that season. Oh, I could. It's the one thing I would rail on about on Mad Men. Like, really, the fucking waitress again? Or Peggy with pretty much every one of her odd and ultimately failed relationships until we get to the end of the series.
Yeah.
I mean, when Peggy leaves the agency, that I feel is like a huge emotional moment. That affects me much more than any breakup with Don or whatever. It just, he takes her hand. I start getting verklempt just thinking about it now.
Yeah, get the little goosebumps.
But there's just so many great moments, either between them or even when they're not even together, but they're connected, like the dueling Heinz pitches and him overhearing her, or everything that happens in, the episode, The Strategy. It's, all the way to the very final episode, of course. I mean, I have always contended that while ostensibly this series, Don Draper is the main character, the lead, he's at the center, and thus, when that's the case, all of the characters are supposed to revolve around him. I always think Don's like number one, and she's kind of like, Peggy is like number 1A. Because I think you could make the case that, yeah, I guess the show is about Don Draper, but you know what? The show is almost equally about her journey as well, you know?
It's very much from her perspective, because day one is her first day on the job.
Right.
She is the audience surrogate, in a way, to the world of Sterling Cooper and the advertising world at large.
Right.
When she learns something, we learn it.
It's it could be a weird parallel to make, but it's kind of like Beecher on Oz.
Wow. Wow.
But Beecher, at least initially, is our stand-in, because he's also someone who's not unlike all the inmates on Oz. He's basically a regular guy. He just got, but he killed someone drunk driving. But unlike everyone else you encounter on Oz, they're all pretty much different levels of murderers, whatever. But he's being exposed and meeting everything for the same time. And we're kind of like, oh, Beecher is us, and then until, oh, no, wait, Beecher's not us anymore. No more. Anyway, yeah, I made that connection. It's really great. I guess I look at it like, when you look at Mad Men as if you were to look at Mad Men just as the journey of Don Draper, even though he does have various points of, I'll use that word again because that we always repeat words like this. He has various points of redemption throughout the series. I think, personally, and this is where I'm going to be tiptoeing around to not spoil certain things, then I'm going to listen to this podcast. Why am I bothering? I think ultimately, if it's his journey, it's a tragedy. And we can talk about this in more detail later on, because I kind of feel that even though one could say, oh, but we leave Don on a positive note, I kind of contend, there's something kind of cynical and jaded about where we really leave Don. But putting any possible spoilers aside, I just think over the course of 7 seasons, can one say that Don Draper truly learned and grew as a person? It's a little iffy. He has moments, and I'm not going to say he didn't progress at all, but I think they deliberately are telling us throughout the series he's not moving forward, whereas everyone around him is. I always use the moment in season 5 where he decides to put on the Beatles album and then takes it off like 30 seconds later. Because it's like, yeah, that's telling us something about his character and how he's not moving forward the way everyone else is. He doesn't get it. He hasn't, he is becoming the old man.
Right.
Quite frankly, at that point.
And to speak vaguely about the finale, you do think he's changed somewhere as you, the last time we see him on screen, and then, nope, same old Don.
Oh yeah, that's
if
why
you know what I'm getting at.
I know exactly what you're getting at, and it's why for the few detractors that the finale had, I go, are you kidding? Think about that. That's a brilliant ending. Shut up. Anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying that because there's an AMC guy on the show. But almost dovetailing back to what I was saying before, for most of the series, I think the point was, despite being perceived by many as, well, Don's a good guy, we peel away that perception from season to season. So that's why I'm saying, like, I don't really feel, even when you start saying, oh, he is starting to get better. He's starting to evolve a little bit here or learn from his mistakes. Little bits here and there, inches instead of feet or miles, quite frankly. But let's face it, by the time we reach the end, has he even given up drinking? I mean, I know where he is at the end. He's not drinking there, but just before that, I'm pretty sure I saw him drinking beer. I'm pretty sure he's still drinking.
Yeah, he'll be right back to it.
Yeah.
But it's probably like smoking. It just meant something different.
Right.
Quitting meant something different.
Right.
It meant I'll do it a little less.
Exactly. Now, but Peggy, on the other hand, but if you reframe the show to kind of what you were saying, and look at it as Peggy being the main character we're following, she has the more positive journey. I mean, yeah, she does have her occasional similarities to Don, but she does learn as she goes on. She deals with obstacles that a man like Don Draper would never have to deal with. And even if her life isn't perfect, she's about overcoming things. And she keeps getting, and she's getting better as it goes along. I mean, her life is not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. It's probably going to be another 10 years for her to achieve what a man in her place would accomplish in less than half that time. But she's someone who has persevered. And I think, this episode, it's not just the starting point, but it's literally not just the midpoint of the series, but it's the relationship. It's a major step up for them. Because it doesn't mean that they won't have disagreements from this point on. Obviously, I could think of a number of snippy and sniping comments Peggy's going to make about Don in the episodes that follow this one. Like I said, and as I said before, she does eventually leave the agency, and the main reason is because she needs to get out from under his shadow, to grow on her own. But by the end of I use the phrase, by the end of the day, or end of the series, which is more correct here, I just think that she's got the one of the more positive trajectories, which you can say that was all her. Nothing was handed to her. She other than maybe her getting the opportunity at the very beginning, way back in season 1. So thank you, Don. But the rest I put on her.
But I mean, that was just that classic case of opportunity and preparation. She was ready to say something when the window opened for her, and Don heard it. Oh,
by the way, were you one of the people who thought, you were at AMC, you probably weren't allowed to think something this stupid. Were you annoyed by people?
He was DB Cooper.
Oh, the DB Cooper thing. Oh God. Okay. Well, that's like my number 2 stupid thing that people kept saying before we got to the end of the show. My number 1 was, it's clearly going to end with him dying and falling out a window because that's what the opening credits tell us every week. I was like, it's like, shut up. I hate you.
Yeah, that bugged me. The hypothetical ending that most intrigued me, I think, was old Don. If we saw him like now, and if we see Sally in some kind of successful position, and maybe an older Peggy, but it just seemed like too much of a 6 feet under tack on kind of thing.
I agree. That's how it felt to me.
So I walked back from that hope.
Well, I have already convinced myself that the chilling adventures of Sabrina is actually somehow a sequel to Mad Men, and that's where Sally actually went. Because dealing with a dad like that, I'm sure of course she changed her name. No wonder her whole lineage is all confusing on that. So they come up with this half-baked Harry Potter-like bullshit story for her. Whatever. I can't wait for John. I can't wait for John Hamm to show up on that show. It's like, come on, you got to bring him on. He has to be the devil. How could you not? You probably didn't offer him enough money. Anyway. Another thought I had about the episode overall, and again, this is kind of the conversation I have every once in a while about different notable episodes of television. Something that we've talked about on this podcast several times over the years, and when you're having like intense TV conversation with someone, we talk about the idea of a bottle episode. And I think everyone who's listening knows what a bottle episode is, so we don't have to go through that whole explanation. What's interesting with The Suitcase is technically it's not a bottle episode, but it still ends up feeling like one.
Yes. Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing on my rewatch. I mean, technically a bottle episode, the purpose of it is to be cheap.
Right. So
you can save money for something else. It's encapsulated. It's in the space. I mean, what is it? Exactly 24 hours? It starts at the beginning of the day and it ends.
Yeah, the beginning of the
maybe
next
a
day.
little later than the beginning of the day.
Yeah.
It's so very self-contained, and you just. This episode does one of my favorite things that Mad Men did. Mm-hmm. Was two of my favorite things. One of them is that you see Don actually working.
Right.
Because you don't always see him like doing the work that is his job description.
Right.
The other thing is when it ties into an actual cultural event that happened that day. And like it means something. And that was the fight. So there is one core to this. It's the Samsonite pitch. And it's more of a play than a bottle episode. It's almost entirely in the office, except for some phone calls to restaurants and when they actually go out to the bar and the diner.
Right.
But it's almost a play.
Right. Basically it's those trips to the bar and the diner that kind of take it away from being the more traditional bottle episode. Well, all be within the same space, same, or what have you. But I do get what you're saying about it feeling more like a play as a result. Absolutely. It's kind of reminds me a little bit of another episode of television that actually made our countdown. Much earlier in the countdown was an episode of Mr. Robot, which 407 Proxy Authentication, which also very much had a bottle episode kind of feel, had a play-like feel. That they took it to a more little extreme with that one, where they actually gave it like, act 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
This one didn't do that per se, although one can imagine when it originally aired, it had commercial breaks, and those of us who know what a TV script is, those are the act breaks. So it does actually have act breaks in it. I love when you watch things in a service that has commercials and they don't put the commercials in the right spots and just drives you crazy.
Oh, yeah. Like Crackle or something. You see a second of the act that follows and then it goes to a break. Then it comes in like mid-sentence.
Or worse, they cut it too soon. I was like, oof. I can't tell you the number of streaming services I subscribe to now that I don't even use on a monthly basis, but I'm still paying. But I'm paying for the commercial-free version because each one, I tried it with commercials, and it's like, I just can't anymore.
No.
So,
Seinfeld on Hulu alone, you save like 100 hours of your life by paying the $3 to not get commercials.
Oh, my God. Hulu, CBS All Access, or whatever it is now, Paramount All Plus, whatever. Amazon. At one point, for the first week or two of all those things, I had it with ads. And then we're like, no, I can't do this anymore.
Nope.
Oh my God, I was trying to watch The Good Fight for like 2 seasons. Like, oh my God, the ads are driving me crazy. I just can't anymore. Because I realized that for the last 10 years or more, probably more than that, everything, even shows that I need to watch that night. Like a Mad Men, for example. Say it's 2010 and it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Whatever. I'm waiting till 10:15. And then I'm going to start watching because that way I can skip the commercials and then, 11 o'clock, I'm done. And if there happens to be an ad for something, I got it on fast forward. Like, that's a trailer I want to check out or something. I'll stop. How often?
Yeah.
But Better Call Saul's coming back this summer. Okay. Not in 2010, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. One of the most fun and most challenging aspects of my job is getting people to stop DVRs. I'm part of the problem myself, but it's like, we're shooting a Microsoft commercial tied into The Walking Dead. Let's make that first shot look like it's in the woods somewhere. And you're fast forwarding, and then you're like, it's back. And you're a full 10 seconds in before you realize, God damn it, they got me.
Well, I do try not to do it with AMC stuff for the last 5 or 6 years at least. Why would I say that? Well, when you guys did, I think I still have the entire marathon you guys did of Better Call Saul that had all the little extras that were put into it, and I DVR'd the entire thing, And I said, when I do a rewatch of this, I want to watch it with these for the little tidbits with Odenkirk and Seahorn and whatever. But, it's still sitting in the DVR.
It's there for you.
It's there. I did watch anyway. But with this episode, it's the fact that they pare the story down to just these two characters. And while the episode absolutely does advance the season arc plot-wise, still, this episode, it's so much more about character than anything else. But that's kind of like what I would say about the series overall. I always have this way of looking at television series where I kind of break them into basically I break them into essentially three categories in my mind. You've got series that are based around plot, you've got series that are based around character, and then you have series that actually manage to do a good to very good hybrid of them both. And that's not enough, and there's not knocking any show that falls into any of these three categories. A show that's just about plot could be an amazing show, or a show that's just about character, and so on. Just to illustrate, like a series that's just about plot, 24 is a series about plot,
Yeah.
But then you even have shows which, although there's, there is strong character work, or you might have certain creators and showrunners who insist that at the end, it was really all about the characters. Yeah. But the reason why I was watching Lost for 5 seasons was about the plotting and the questions, not about the characters. Shut up, Damon.
Yeah.
But, but again, it's not to take away from them, but shows like 24, Lost, Game of Thrones also, I would say those are more plot-driven shows. Whereas a show that's more about character, you don't have those as often. But I'm going to say, you have an extreme version like Rectify, which is almost totally a character-driven show. I know that falls under your umbrella because of the whole AMC Sundance connection.
That's Sundance.
But that's the plotting on that show is minimal at best, I would say. And I love Rectify, but it's one of those shows I understand why it's a hard sell for some people.
Yeah, people give up.
But the ones that are more, but the ones that are a bit more deceptive about it, I would say. And again, I'm going to link these two shows again. The Sopranos and Mad Men, I feel, are more character focused than they are plot focused. Obviously there is plot to both. Of course there is. But I think as in terms of how it moves from episode to episode, season to season, to me, it's really more character focused, and the storylines are more about the development or dissolution of characters than it is about, just plot twists and whatever. People wanted The Sopranos maybe to be more plot driven. People are like, they don't do enough with the gangsters and something. Yeah, you figured that out, right? Did you? I kind of figured that out a long time ago. And then the shows that are hybrids, I think the two best examples of hybrids are probably Breaking Bad and The Wire, because those are two shows that are very plot driven, but they're also very character driven at the same time. Yeah. So they kind of go hand in hand. I always have said Breaking Bad. Oh, wait, who put Pornhub on? Anyway, I always thought Breaking Bad was like the best example of, the symbiosis of plot and character for a show. But what's interesting, and I'm wondering if you would agree with this or not, or you're going to tell me to shut up, because now it falls under, your time at AMC. Better Call Saul being the what do we call it? The spinoff. I was about to call it a sequel. Spinoff of Breaking Bad. Unlike Breaking Bad, I think Better Call Saul really is more character driven than anything else. It
is a study in character development.
Yeah,
it really is.
And I think that's something that was a decision made from the get-go by Gilligan and Gould, because unlike all these other shows, the conceit with Better Call Saul is, and the trick, and the thing that makes the difficulty for them is, we all know where the show has to go.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes more about, but how does this person become this person? That's pure character, so it's...
Yeah, surely. And I would argue probably none of the promos for Mad Men or The Sopranos, or a little bit for Saul, are about what's going to happen next. But it's more like you might see a moment and your first question is, oh shit, how are they going to react to that?
Wow, you just made something just pop into my head, which I hadn't thought about in about five or 6 years now. Do you recall, because the one problem with doing a rewatch, we don't get to see it's not part of the rewatch because it's not. Because I went from watching a few episodes on IMDbTV.com, whatever,
mm-hmm.
and then I realized, I've got the entire show on DVD, and these commercials are driving me crazy right now.
Yeah. So it's available ad-free on AMC Plus. Starting a free trial today. I
was thinking about that when I was like, is Kevin going to get mad that I didn't promote AMC? Because I knew AMC had to have a streaming service. And I said, I just want to give people the free way to get it. But now it's a free trial. Anyway.
No, totally. You don't get the previously ons on IMDb, do you?
You don't get the previously. But the thing that just popped into my head, which I think people will forget previously. Because all shows have previously, previously on Lost.
The on the next.
The weird thing that Mad Men did is, because shows have the on the next. Mad Men I don't know if they only did this for its final season. It might have just been a final season kind of joke more than, I can't remember them doing it for previous seasons, though they might have, where they would just kind of, it always felt like almost a random cutting together of odd little moments that made it was almost like an entire compilation of non sequiturs that made no sense for the next episode, and we'd always be like, "What?"
So the network cuts those. It's not the show that cuts them.
Okay, that makes sense.
So that's why you won't see it packaged with, if it's redistributed elsewhere. AMC totally knew what they were doing with those. It did become a joke, not like a joke, but it's like, we knew what the pattern was. Let's amp that up. It was this fantastic producer, editor, or predator named Josh who would cut most of those. And I mean, Josh, I believe, was working season 1, and I got to give him some props. A really early promo, trying to cut it together. He's like, I need a track that's got some kind of like real 60s feel. And he came across this one song by a completely unknown artist. And, music's expensive for a promo. But he was like, she's pretty up and coming. Let's inquire. And they got a song by Amy Winehouse, like right before she hit it big.
Wow.
So from then on, like, Josh was the Mad Menologist. And the film school rules for cutting a promo are every shot has to have motion or emotion. So when the on the next producers are watching the episode, they're just logging where are the head turns, where's somebody throwing a glass, where's something like that. And Matt Weiner was also so precious about spoilers and just not tipping his hat where anything was going. It was like, well, we got to show people something. So it's almost like if you open up iMovie and just drag a bunch of your home videos in there and cut a trailer, and it just randomly selects spots,
right,
and then somehow cuts it together, and it still feels like a trailer.
That's amazing.
And everybody totally knew what they were doing. And then when The Simpsons did it, like, that was played at all the parties. I don't think it was even cut from actual bites from the show, but they did an on the next Mad Men style. And then this year for the Christmas programming, we got Mad Men music and rehired the old voiceover guy, Rick Wasserman, and did a Mad Men style Christmas promo that I hope I can find and send to you. And it's spot on.
Wow.
Because it was like previously on Best Christmas Ever, and then just like random Christmas movie lines, and then Kris Kringle from Year Without a Santa Claus just giving a weird head turn to camera.
God.
I gotta find it for you.
That's terrific.
But yes, to your point, the promos were really weird.
See, something that just popped in my head to think of, and that gave us like that beautiful nugget. I adored them because they were just so ridiculous. But obvious, I knew what they were doing. I thought that's what made it. Yeah. I thought it was just so smart. It was like, oh, because obviously, especially when you're in the final season, we're all watching. We're all coming back.
Yeah.
You don't.
Yeah. Nobody finishes episode 9 and they're like, should I continue?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll give them 35 seconds to convince me. And they're like, okay, yeah, I'm tuning in.
I just love the teasing nature of it. It's like, oh, this is great. It's just, I was a huge admirer of that. It's one of the things I just remember loving about watching it, back in the days of real time. They were great, Bob. Anyway, so, I had to get that one in there somewhere. I'm trying to think of other things I really kind of think are interesting about the episode, other than the obvious. You had mentioned that they're doing. We had already mentioned a couple times about the Samsonite pitch that they were supposed to be working on.
Yes.
Another interesting decision going into this episode is that every season there's always at least one, maybe a couple, like major accounts that they're dealing with, which seem to be, at least as far as the ad agency specific storylines are concerned, they're always a major part of that. Whether it be Lucky Strike or, Dow Chemical or those kind of things. Samsonite is, at this point in time, is not considered a major account. It just isn't. And because it wasn't on that level. It wasn't like Big Tobacco or a car or an airline or whatever. It's kind of more, mid-level. I mean, it's better than like the local crap they used to do, whatever. But it's middle. But I love it because it's so clear to me. That this is putting on the wannabe writers, or just writers hat. I should stop saying wannabe. They knew from the very start what they were doing. And having Samsonite being used, because you want that metaphor. You need that metaphor. You want the metaphor of the suitcase. Yeah. You don't get it if you don't have Samsonite as the account that they're working on. I mean, I made the joke earlier about unpacking the suitcase. Well, yes, that's what this episode is. They're unpacking their shit on each other. I mean, right, and the fact that if you read up on the episode, or maybe if you listen to one of the commentaries on a DVD or something, when you find out that it was actually a late addition to the episode, the idea of having the ghost of Anna Draper holding a suitcase, you almost want to say,
holy shit, that didn't even click for me.
It's like, you didn't, oh my gosh. To me, it's astonishing that wasn't the plan, like, from day one, because I'm like, of course she has to be holding a suitcase. It would be weird if she wasn't, because the episode's it's called The Suitcase, and everything I just mentioned, all the metaphors, whatever, she's leaving. She's taking a trip. Her last, of course she has a fucking suitcase! It's beautiful.
That's one of the greatest show titles since Face Off.
Yeah, right. Ooh, Face Off. Talk about that. Anyway, so I just love that, obviously, so the foundation for this episode was laid. Once they decide, okay, we're going to have Samsonite be a client or whatever, it's like, oh, yeah, that's why you're doing it. This doesn't work if it's, if it's glow code or something. There has to be something like that. Although we do get to hear about that. The other thing that comes to mind is you mentioned, one of the things you kind of appreciate about certain episodes is when they work in a real life historical event into the show. And I agree. There's something I kind of like about, and something that Mad Men did. In fact, I would say Mad Men was the show to do it. And then later on, you'd have a show like, say, The Americans, I know, did this. At least to me, very clearly lifting the idea from Mad Men. There's probably might be one or two other shows that have done this as well, but those are the two leading examples. Every season of, now I hear the cars, going vroom, vroom, vroom in our neighborhood. 'Cause we live only blocks away from each other.
An airplane fly overhead, and then I hear it through my headphones.
So, where was it? Oh, yeah. The funny thing with Mad Men that I always loved was you have to play Mr. Detective at least at the very beginning of the season, if not throughout the season, because they will work in a little something, a little fact, a little reference, a little something somewhere that will tell you when we are. Because Mad Men would jump time from season to season. So now you're wondering, oh, where are we? When are we? And I don't mean, and they would usually have something there that would really give you, oh, I know this is now, this episode is taking place on, I don't know, October 7th, 1963. I'm just making up a date right now, obviously. And the Americans would do the same thing, because Americans also was taking place, started in the early 80s, and they would do a thing at the first episode. It's like, how do I figure out when we are? And then you'd see something. You'd see like a movie poster somewhere, and you'd be like, "Oh, okay, I know when we are right now." Because when was The Stuff playing in movie? And it would be something like weirdly obscure, like The Stuff playing in movie theaters. Like, when the fuck was The Stuff out? Oh, 1980. But when
I would love when the Americans would go to our local movie theater, because it is so stuck in the 80s. They didn't even, they would like change two posters and it looked like it was 1986.
And that's how that movie theater paid I'm sure that's how they were able to afford to redo a bunch of the theaters with the seats and everything and build that new
it was in
party room.
The Americans, Mr. Robot, and The Deuce within the space of like 18 months.
I forgot about, oh yes, right, I didn't know it was in The Deuce, because The Deuce filmed a bunch of places around here. The Mr. Robot thing, I remember I identified that. I thought that was hysterical. There's also some Jennifer Lopez show that was on briefly on NBC. I think they filmed over there. I forget what it was called. Something with blue in it. Is it Shades of Blue? Or
Rookie Blue?
Rookie
Shades of Blue, that's the right one.
Whatever the hell it was. But I clearly didn't watch it. But anyway, that's why and meanwhile, they still haven't reopened, unlike other theaters in this city.
Nope.
But whatever. I don't remember what it's like to go see movies anymore. But going back to what you were saying about just actual historical events, it's interesting because there's always going to be events that kind of the show has to do. And obviously the assassination of Kennedy is one episode. Obviously you have an entire season building up to the election results of Nixon versus Kennedy, which is actually a nice little history lesson for folks, because especially in recent years, when you realize, we didn't know, a lot of times we didn't know who won the presidency right off the bat. Sometimes we had to wait till the next day. Sometimes things were questioned. It has happened. Not like this, but it has happened.
Yeah.
And the Clay Liston fight. And my own background working in, the stock photography business for a few decades, there are a few different versions of the iconic photo of Ali standing over Liston, and I'll tell you right now, we licensed the fucking hell out of those. That's probably one of our top 10 sellers every year for decades, whatever. And the fact that I think there was even a situation in the episode because they were showing one headline from one newspaper, and I think both the different newspapers had slightly different versions of that photo. Because everyone always remembers as, Ali standing over him, or Clay standing over him, however you want to refer to him, because he referred to himself as Ali, but the press would only call him Clay at that point.
Yeah.
But it's kind of, I love that they were able to, because that's such an important moment in sports history, but I also love the fact that it's kind of representative of who these characters are in the show. I mean, Don rooting for Liston, of course he is. Of course he is. Ali is the next generation. What I say before about Don doesn't change, yeah, of course Don is Liston. That's why I love when Don's in his whatever degree of drunkenness, and for whatever, even though Peggy just wants to fucking leave, and meanwhile he's talking about the Liston and Ali, and you think Ali's, and they talk about being whether he's attractive or not, and how Liston fighting style, whatever, and it's kind of embarrassing to watch at a certain point. But the next generation of Ali is like Peggy, or even the other the younger ad guys on staff, whatever. So I always thought that was kind of the slight little metaphor going on there. That's the way I took it, because I'm Scot. That makes no sense.
No, I like it. I like it.
Another thing I had forgotten about. I mentioned before about the episodes that bookend this, right? I talked about all those stories a bunch of times. And the one after was the Summer Man. I think it's really funny that in The Suitcase, Don mercilessly is mocking Roger and the idea that Roger is writing a book. In fact, the whole build-up when he's joking about the tape, Right. The triple play. It's because the rule of three in comedy. The third is always the big punchline. So it's the secretary was a hellcat. Bert lost his balls. Roger's writing a book. What is Don doing in the very next episode? He's journaling. He's basically writing his own book in the very next episode. I'm going. It's Don, because if there's one thing Don knows how to do, as we talk about in The Suitcase, hey, he's all about ripping off other people's ideas and passing them on as his own. Because it's in the agency, so it doesn't belong to anybody. Anyway, is there anything else about the episode that struck you before we move on?
I had one little nitpick.
Oh, goody. Oh, I love nitpicks.
Yeah. Because, I was thinking of my high school trigonometry teacher who on day one said never gives out 100% because if he starts to suspect you got a perfect score, he's going to look real close. And that's what I had to do for this episode. But New York geography in movies and TV is a big thing for me.
Oh, I agree.
And so in 401, Don tells the reporter that SCDP is in the Time Life building. 1276th Avenue. Peggy's boyfriend, dinner at the Forum of the 12 Caesars, which is now closed. That was at 57 West 48th Street. Scott, those two addresses are closer to each other than she could so easily have ducked out just to hug her mom, hug her boyfriend, and come back. That it bugged me that was the restaurant that Matt Weiner settled on as the setting for that dinner. It's 2 blocks away. Sterling, on the other hand, calls Don from, he says he's in a bar next to Keen's. That's at 36th.
Right.
That's like 15 blocks. And that was a possibility to go duck out to. Like I said, I really, really had to look for this. But it was just because I had never heard of the Forum of the 12 Caesars.
Right.
It's a legendary place once you look into it.
Oh, I have not. I have to confess, I wasn't familiar with it either. I
remember Googling it when this episode first premiered. I had to look it up again. So I was like, is that, first of all, what a weird fucking name for a restaurant. But it just, I wish maybe he had taken her out in Bay Ridge. But that might have tipped that her mom was going to be there. So that was my little nitpick.
All right, that's interesting. I'm trying. Look. If there's anyone who can appreciate a good nitpick about something, especially when it comes to New York geography in a TV show or movie, I'm right there with you, man. I mean,
I feel like I'm in good company. Yeah.
I mean, I was just within the last few weeks. I don't remember why it came up in conversation, but I actually said my main reason for my main issue with Die Hard 3 is It doesn't make sense geography wise. It's not, I know it's not reality, but I guess I can't buy it. There's no way anyone can get from any of the places they're in that movie in the time frame that happens. It's not possible. I mean,
it's like when Adam Sandler goes on a date in a movie. And it's like, well, yeah, we'll go to the Bronx Zoo and then see Wall Street and then Shea Stadium. And like, you cannot do that in it. It's like Ferris Bueller time.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's like, wait, he got from Yankee Stadium to the West Village in how long? You know, whatever. Like, I'm not sure. You know, then he's in New Jersey. Now he's in. No, shut up. Anyway, okay. That's not a bad one. I kind of still want to kind of put that at the feet of Peggy just choosing not to do that, even though it would have only taken her a few minutes, because she should have just, quite frankly, although we don't have an episode, she could have just said, you know, fuck this, I'm leaving, because he basically said go, you know, then just go.
You are correct. She does have the choice. You
Right.
see her make the decision.
Yes.
Oh, which reminds me, she's in the bathroom when she decides that, right? Looking in the mirror? Or is she still in her office?
When she decides to stay?
Yeah.
Or when?
Oh, no. She's by the elevator.
She's by the elevator. Yeah.
Because there's another decision she makes when she is walking Don to the bathroom to puke.
Mm-hmm.
She stops and she has to choose between the men's room and the women's room.
Yes.
And it is a moment of like, all right, Peggy, which group are you with? Are you with the old school ad men, or are you still one of the up and comers? And she brings him into the men's room.
Right.
Like, it's a signal of, it's like she is authorized to be in there now.
Right. One of the things I love about that moment, your connection's breaking up just a little bit. I love her looking at the urinals. And it's one of those thoughts. It's one of those thoughts you have for a moment. You realize she's not been in a men's room before.
Right.
I love it. It's one of those things because, I mean, obviously being a guy, we kind of take it for granted. And even women nowadays, even if you don't generally go to the men's room, it's not like such an alien thing because maybe they've seen it so much in TV, movies, or they've had to be in one at one time or another, or maybe they made out with someone in a men's room. Who knows? But then it's like, oh my God, a men's room. What's that? Really?
But I mean, did you know like a lot of women's rooms have couches?
I hear they're wonderful.
That's a thing.
I hear they're like wonderlands of splendor. You know, there's animated characters who frolic about. And, you know, anyway. So, moving away from the episodes of, although if any thoughts come to your mind about it, feel free to bring them up again. That's, you know, we don't stick to too many rules on this crap cast. I had already mentioned that this is actually literally my favorite episode, not only of the series, but it's probably my favorite episode of television, period. But when it comes to Mad Men, it doesn't mean there aren't a few others that I don't feel strongly about, obviously. You know,
yeah.
There's a few that are among probably my favorite. I haven't, unlike some shows, like, you know, certain other shows that were on your network or whatever, I haven't actually done a list of a top 10 or 25. Find my blog. It's amazing, from 2013. But there are a couple favorites of mine that are actually in the final season, which I've already talked about at length on this podcast years ago. That would be The Strategy and Waterloo. But again, I already had an hour-plus long podcast devoted to them. So what am I going to say now that I didn't say that? I like them even more? Yeah, whatever. So instead, I'm going to take off a few of my favorites from the rest of the series and maybe just then zoom in on one, which, of course, I've already talked about on the podcast. So, you know, it's the podcast of redundancy. First of all, the last two episodes of season one, Nixon versus Kennedy and The Wheel, are absolute. Those two back to back. If I have a top 10 episodes, they're in my top 10. I think they're just fantastic because season one is very strong to begin with, and this is always where it all leads to. The Don Pete showdown that culminates in Bert Cooper's "Who Cares" is one of the greatest moments in the history of the show, period. And it may be the reason why I put Bert Cooper in my little top 3 earlier in the podcast. Not simply for the who cares, although the who cares thing is genius in my mind. It's what he says to Don about Pete afterwards when he makes the comment about you never know how loyalty is born. Because, again, this is early season 1. And that holds true for the rest of the series. And it's also one of the reasons I actually, rapey moments aside, I actually try to stick up for Pete. Because over the course of the rest of the series, I feel Pete is the one that defends Don probably more than anybody else does. I mean, he does call him a valuable piece of horse flesh at one point. Or maybe not the nicest way to refer to him, but still, he's the guy to do it. Even to the detriment of people like Peggy, which he shouldn't have done. But he's still a Don guy from that point on. And when you see how it started with the antagonism between those two, Bert Cooper saying that is like, oh, I love that they had a plan and they knew this what they were doing from this point on with this character. I just love that scene.
Yeah.
And obviously, I mean, the wheel, it's all about the Kodak carousel presentation. I mean, you know, like, I'm just like, what's his name? Rich Summers' character. Harry Crane has to leave.
Yeah. He's running.
I'm like, I'm right there with you, Harry. Oh, by the way, can I just say right now, because in my mini rewatch, I essentially watched. It really came down to me watching like a few episodes from every season, essentially. The fact that from the beginning all the way up to pretty much towards the end, there is such antipathy and just dislike for Harry Crane throughout the show.
They're so mean to him.
They're so mean to him. And I'm always like, I'm not sure he deserves the meanness. Yeah. I just realized, I think it's just like, I didn't listen to a commentary referring to it. I'm sure one of them does, because I think he participates in some of them. Like, it just feels like it's just a great running gag, because he's the one guy no one seems to like. And like, so when he's going to, be up for a partnership, and they're like, over my dead body. Anyone else?
He's somebody like, they never talk about him, but everybody knows they hate him.
Yeah. It's just, I find it fascinating because, for example, Pete's obviously the asshole of the office, and yet there's so much more negative, nasty stuff said about Harry Crane than there's ever been said about Pete in that office.
Yeah.
The other guy, I'm trying to remember.
Paul.
Wow, can't believe I'm drawing a blank.
Oh boy.
I'm embarrassed. I'm so embarrassed right now. Let's say, beard guy with the pipe who ends up writing a script for Star Trek. Or trying to write a script for Star Trek. Why am I drawing a blank on his name?
Jesus Christ.
That's embarrassing. What is wrong with me? If only I had some device that I could... Here we go. Kinsey. Kinsey. How can I... Paul Kinsey.
Is his first name at least Paul?
Yeah, it is Paul.
Oh.
Paul Kinsey.
I'll give myself that one.
Yeah, you're fine.
Yeah, point.
It's so funny. I was almost gonna say I'm so proud of myself because Mad Men is the show that I don't forget any character names. I'm glad.
Yeah.
And then I proceed because I was like, I can remember them all. As I started, Ken and it's like Sal and Trudy. Whatever. I forgot. Wow, embarrassed. Anyway, moving other episodes I'm really a fan of. The sheer craziness of a guy walks into an advertising agency. I love that episode. I don't know if anyone could possibly have imagined that someone would have their foot run over and essentially ripped apart by a lawnmower in an office in general. I almost want to go back and I don't know if there's any commentary on that. There's got to be commentary on that one. I want to find out. Could that have even remotely been based on something that happened in real life? Did that happen to someone? Because I'd love to know that.
Right.
I'm sure it didn't, but it's just...
Like some legendary, yeah.
The only others, a few others that come to mind. I really like Faraway Places from season 5 a lot. There's something I just, again, going back to my quote unquote my writer side, I really love the construction of that episode and how we keep coming back to the same moment, and then now we're going to follow these two, and now we're going to follow these two, and now I love that way of telling a story. I get a huge kick out of it. And finally, not so fine, but season 6 is for immediate release. I think it's a nice jolt to the series at that point in the season, and it's a lot of fun as a regard, and it brings to mind what actually is my second favorite episode of the entire series, which I did hint about earlier, and the one I'll talk about a little bit now. It is that season 3 finale, Shut the Door, Have a Seat.
Have a seat.
That's absolutely my after The Suitcase, it's my favorite episode. I call it, it's the one where they blow the whole damn thing up. I mean, if one chooses to rewatch that one, and I would recommend it to anyone who's a Mad Men fan, hey, just go rewatch that one again. Just count how many times people are actually essentially told to shut the door and have a seat throughout that episode. It's phrased different ways.
It does. They do that in a couple of different shows. It happens with All Due Respect in The Wire. It's the name of the episode, and then like 2 different people say it.
Right.
Or 3 different people say it. And it happens in something else. Damn it, I wish I could remember. But it's this line that's repeated, and it means something different each time.
Right. It's such a... And what I like about it, because obviously on Mad Men, let's put it this way. It's not called Happy Men. You know? Because it's got its fair share of sad or miserable or just kind of moments throughout the show, which I love because that's me. But but this specific episode, and there is something that happens in the episode, i.e., Don and Betty, really just dissolving their marriage once and for all, But the bulk of the episode, it kind of plays like a heist caper. This could have... Yes,
it gets very exciting.
There's like it's almost like an Ocean's 11 kind of feel to it. There's actually an episode, and actually in a weird way, it reminds me of an episode. Oh my God, I just realized it's in this countdown. There's certain similarities to an episode of The Good Wife, which actually made the countdown, an episode called Hitting the Fan, which is dealing a lot with, okay, we're at DEFCON 5 and we need to do something to form our own. In this case, it's an agency. In that case, it's a new firm, and everything is going crazy all at the same time. And people are doing, they're trying to run out with files and things and objects and whatever just to try to, quickly get something going somewhere else. But I think it's what's a great episode. It's not just that heist aspect, because the entire episode is about reestablishing bonds and relationships throughout the series. Everything with Pete and with Joan. And then they go and they establish that Lane Price, he's not just going to be an ally, but he's going to be one of them. Or at least that's the way it seemed at that point in the series. It's just, to me, I just think if it's not the most fun episode of Mad Men, I'm not sure which one is then. It's just, to me, I think it's the most fun one.
And tell me, is the last line Joan picking up the phone? And she says Sterling Cooper, Draper Price, and that's end of season?
I believe so.
What a beautiful way to end.
They're more so than probably most other shows. I love the way Mad Men ends most of their seasons. Yeah. They will have and quite often it is about, that's just a great line to end on. Whether it be that, whether it be, are you alone? I just have to say that. If you know the episode, you know what I'm talking about. Or if it's not a line, is it season 1 with the fake out with Don coming home, or season 2? It's season 1, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it's season 1.
Yeah, when he first comes home and he thinks he's going to be with them, and then no, they just fake this out.
Yeah.
Mr. I used to write for The Sopranos, motherfucker. Playing with reality. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the way they've ended. Oh, that season when they end with him walking away from the set of Megan on the commercial, and they use the James Bond song "You Only Live Twice." It's so.
I forgot that was a finale. Yeah,
it's a finale, and what I said about that very first episode then it folds all the way to that episode. Does it get any more cinematic feeling than that moment of him walking away from that set? The way it looks. I mean, that it's obviously it's on my TV screen, but I could have imagined that on a 70mm screen, quite frankly. It just has that feel. And so of course you have to pick a song that's a movie song, which, You Only Live Twice back then. And I think that if I'm not mistaken, that's where it leads to him being in the bar and the woman asking him, "Are you alone?" And him just looking at her, and then it ends.
Just looks at her. Oh.
And then we all know, I guess I know what behavior is going to come back next season.
And the Halloween one, when the guy opens the door and he says, "What are you supposed to be?" Is that I know it's not the end of a season, but is that the last line of that episode?
Are we talking about the Gypsy and the Hobo episode?
Yes.
I think so. I was rewatching that, but unfortunately, I was having an issue with my the TVT. I think there was a smudge on it, and it kept freezing on me. And I was watching. It was like 4:30 in the morning. I was like, all right. I've watched the first 35. I'm fine. I've seen it before. So I can't remember if that's exactly how it ended. I was freezing on them going trick-or-treating. That I know. And I remember thinking, Gypsy and the Hobo. Oh,
you were right there.
Oh, yeah. That's interesting because of, with the hobo code and whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's like, oh, look at you being so smart, madman. Anyway. Are there any episodes that kind of come to your mind beyond the suitcase?
I mean, Shut the Door, Have a Seat is, like I said, so exciting. I love it. I think the Hobo Code is another really quiet favorite of mine. Because I love the quiet transitions to flashbacks that this show does.
Right.
And it feels like somebody is sitting there and something makes them think of something from their past. Like just, there is no whoosh. Just a silent thought happens in your head. Flight 1, I liked. And it was for the historical part of it. It was just one of these things that was huge news at the time and I had never heard of. And it just gave me an opportunity to look up something that was like, it must have been the only thing people were talking about for a week.
Right.
And Gold Violin.
Ooh, that's an interesting choice. Good choice. Yeah, it's one of those things where, we could do an entire year's worth of podcast just about the different episodes that are just like really kind of stand out as being just, I love that different episodes are notable for entirely different reasons. Mm-hmm. Not just because they may be based around, or the focal point might be on different characters, whether something monumental or game-changing happens in the episode, whether it be a character death or something with the agency, whatever, or just certain episodes just have certain moments which kind of just strike you as like, okay, that's going to stay with me for a while. And this is a show that kind of has always done that for me, where it's like, okay, that's going to stay with me. And that's probably why I put Mad Men so high on my own personal list of shows. I think I've said before, it may actually be my second favorite show of all time, or at least of the modern era. I keep doing that all the time because I want to catch myself because I feel weird putting any show ahead of Twilight Zone. So I always go, of modern shows. I separate from stuff from the 50s and 60s. So, what can I put over Mirror Mirror from the Star Trek universe? I can't. Anyway. Oh, you should have heard how I recast Star Trek. It's amazing. I'll tell you about it later. I recast it as if it was in 1953. It's amazing.
53. Okay.
Wait, was that the one I did for 53? Yeah, that's right. I did Better Call Saul for 65, Mad Men for 1960, and Star Trek for 1953. And Frasier I did in 1934, I think, or something like that. So, all to get Jack Benny to be the part of Frasier Crane. It's all built around that. Anyway, so it's a series that I mean, I greatly admire it from a writing standpoint. I adore it from, how they told, in my mind, such a perfectly imperfect story, that, it's the beginning and end of the 60s, but it's about so much more than that. And these were characters that I felt so strongly about from day one all the way to the end. And they didn't, other than maybe one storyline, maybe they didn't do things just to we're going to give, there wasn't fan service being done here, generally speaking. There's maybe one thing one can say that about. A little. A certain relationship, one might say, oh, I felt a little fan servicey. I don't buy that because Matthew Weiner and company, they didn't do that for the first 91 episodes. Why? But they waited till the finale to do that? No. I just don't buy it.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably know it. You probably figured it out.
Yeah.
Oh, I can say who it relates. I'll just say it relates to Peggy's character. And I'll just leave it at that. Still mindful in case they're listening. Who knows? Well, we've talked about the finale on the podcast before. Anyway, I would just say I'm a fan of it. I think they did it. Was it the best finale? No, but I really still liked it a whole lot. So it gave me the right amount of closure that I would want for a series like Mad Men, while giving me space to imagine where these characters will go once those credits are rolling. And I love thinking about any finale like that, where I can then actually it does apply to every single finale now I think about it. It's like, is it easier or fun for me to now imagine where those characters are going to be 5 minutes from now, 5 days from now, 5 years from now? And I find that to be the case absolutely with Mad Men and several other shows like that. So I got what I wanted from it. So, yay.
I like that metric. What's about to happen to them and where are they going to be in a long time?
Right. that was why it was funny. When they something we'll go back to your wheelhouse of stuff here. When they did the El Camino follow up to Breaking Bad, which I know there were some people who said, oh, we didn't really need this. Like, well, we didn't really need a TV show in general, so shut up. That's not really an argument for anything.
It's not the point.
We didn't need this.
Yeah.
Really, it's not, unless it's food, shelter, or clothing. You don't really need anything. Shut up. But what I kind of liked about it, we did a whole podcast about that too, but I remembered saying after the Breaking Bad finale, I was like, I'm kind of wondering about Jesse 10 minutes from now. Is he speeding out? Is he getting caught by the cops? Because they're right. Why wouldn't they catch him? Or does he get away? So the fact when I heard they were doing El Camino, I was like, oh my God, they're doing what I was talking about. We're gonna find out. We're gonna find out what happens 5 minutes later. The only thing I'm wondering is are they gonna cut over and are we gonna see Walt still bleeding to death on the floor or dying, whatever? Is a little ghost gonna come out of him, the Haunted Mansion style? Anyway. All right. I think we can close the book on Mad Men then. All right. I'm good with that. Okay. So, the countdown so far. Now, as folks know, as I've been doing for the past few weeks, I'm going to give you all what the actual unofficial 25 through 21 would have been. Kevin, just so you know, these were episodes that didn't actually get their own podcast. I brought them up when we were doing like number 18 or 19 or something. And I said, oh, these are the 5 that didn't make the cut, but this is the actual order. So you can say this is like 25 through 21. And when I look at them now, I'm like, they kind of would have been cool to do a podcast about. Oh, well, too bad. But if we had, then this countdown would be finishing around Labor Day instead of Memorial Day. It's already gone on forever. Right. So anyway, so I will, and then I also reach over and find my iPhone over here. That way I can get the cheesy sound effect for the end of this one. These are the things I have to do on this podcast. All right, here we go. We're very professional here. So number 25, or the hypothetical number 25, was Why We Fight, which is the 9th episode of Band of Brothers. Number 24 would have been Who Goes There, which is the 4th episode of the first season of True Detective. Number 23 was The Subway, which is the 7th episode of season 6 of Homicide, Life on the Street. Number 22, oh look, it's Everybody's Waiting, the series finale of 6 Feet Under. Number 21 was Days Gone By. I cannot believe it, but Days Gone By, the very first episode of The Walking Dead. I know. But you know what? It was their best episode. I know.
That's the pilot, right?
Yes.
Yes.
I know it's very important to you in your in your job. So I'm not insulting the show at all. In fact, look, it made number 21. It's not bad. And the black and white version, even better. Anyway.
No, that's an amazing set of episodes you listed. Why We Fight is that's where they make the horrific discovery.
Yes. It's the episode when you're watching Band of Brothers, and if you don't already know what's going to happen on an episode-to-episode basis, at a certain point you're wondering, hey, I wonder if they're going to cover or get to what happens in that episode. Because if you're not already aware of, the book or whatever happened, and that kind of thing. That was an iffy one for me, only because originally when I was doing the research for the countdown and everything else, I was kind of going out of my way to not include, limited series. And then but then when I was looking at all the actual lists and articles, generally speaking, very few limited series would pop up. At least pop up very high. But that was the one.
Very few where there's a standout episode.
Yeah, and that's, oof. I mean, I had a close friend of mine, also an ex, she's a high school teacher, and she actually teaches classes in, one of the classes she used to teach was a class about genocides. And I showed her that episode once, because I know she's very interested in stuff dealing with the Holocaust and whatever. And she actually borrowed that from me, and she used it in class a couple times over the course of a year. So I was like, say that, and that way, you don't have to make them sit through like 3 hours of Schindler's List. It's just anyway. We're both Jewish. We can make that joke anyway. Yeah, there we go. Which is that's how you make those trains run on time. Anyway,
Jesus Christ.
Blasphemy. Number 20. Number 20 was House's Head from season 4 of House. Number 19, one of the only shows on the countdown I didn't do much of a rewatch on, I have to admit, was The Getaway, the season 4 season finale, of Dexter. Number 18 was Out of Gas, the 8th episode of Firefly. Don't say season 1, there was only one season. Number 17, mentioned it earlier in the podcast, it was 407 Proxy Authentication Required, which is obviously the 7th episode of season 4. Hey, wait a minute. The Suitcase is the 7th episode of season 4. What the hell?
Goodness.
Number 16 was Mixumono, which was the season 2 finale of Hannibal. Number 15, I mentioned a few moments ago, Hitting the Fan from season 5 of The Good Wife. Number 14 was Clyde Bruckman's Final Repose from season 3 of The X-Files. Number 13 was the season 2 finale, Bloody Harlan from Justified.
Oh.
Number 12, Battlestar Galactica made the list with Crossroads Part 2, which is also the finale of Season 3.
Yep.
Number 11, This Extraordinary Being from Watchmen. No recency bias, it just missed the top 10. And now we're getting... this is also where we get into, it becomes the HBO countdown now, doesn't it? Because number 10 is Sold Under Sin, the Season 1 finale of Deadwood. Number 9, you know it had to be on this list somewhere, The Reigns of Castamere from Season 3 of Game of Thrones, one of their many great penultimate episodes. At least before that show went to shit. Anyway, number 8, no, I'm just kidding. Number 8 is The Two Cathedrals, the finale of Season 2 of The West Wing. Number 7, the controversial only in my own mind selection of Hush from Season 4 of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Number 6 was Pine Barrens from Season 3 of The Sopranos. Did I say number 6? Right. So number 5 is The Leftovers International Assassin from Season 2. Number 4 is The Constant from Season 4 of Lost, of course. Number 3, Middle Ground from the penultimate episode of Season 3 of The Wire. Now, y'all just spent the last hour or two, or however long we've been talking, listening to us talk about number 2, which, of course, was The Suitcase, from the 4th season of Mad Men. So, obviously, that just leaves us with 1 to go. Now, I'll admit, I thought about not revealing it, because I try to pull off some kind of surprise. But then I realized, that the moment anyone sees a link, whether it's on Facebook or in their subscription or a tweet or however they access the podcast, you're going to see what it is. And then I realized, let's be honest. I suspect, let's just say, I think the majority of listeners who have either been fans or tolerators of this podcast over the years, you probably already know what number 1 is going to be. So let's just get to it. Well, I love the fact that you're here, Kevin, for this, because, you represent AMC and all that. It's coming in at number 1 on the greatest TV drama episodes of all time is Ozymandias, the soul-shattering episode from the final season of Breaking Bad. Let me stop this before something weird plays. Now, unless he's changed his mind after dealing with me for the last couple hours, joining us on this podcast, because, let's be honest, we're also using this podcast as kind of a litmus test for you, I'm just kidding. But I know how important the show is to you. I before you move away, I still plan to break into your apartment and steal some of your decor items there. Kevin, you will be returning to co-host and converse about this wow of wow episodes. So
yes, I will.
I'm very excited to be talking about that. I mean, because it's Ozymandias, for Christ's sake. And also, just as one more thing for the listeners, you're going to want to listen to that episode not only to scratch your Breaking Bad itch. I'm sure many of you have had that for quite a while, especially because we haven't even had Better Call Saul for the past year. That's COVID, not AMC. Don't worry, I'm not mad at you, Kevin.
I'm with you.
But there will also be some actually definitive announcements about what will be happening with this podcast for the rest of the year. That's the rest of the year. So look forward to that. And if you've already figured out what that's going to be, I already hate you. No, I'm just kidding. So, with all that said, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, guess what? You'll probably enjoy hanging out on our Facebook page as well. It's the Serious TV Drama Podcast page. You can like the page and join the conversation about shows, both old and new, like Mad Men or what we're going to be talking about next week. Oh, boy. You can also subscribe to our feed on... Some call it iTunes, some call it Apple Podcasts. I call it, I don't fucking know anymore. But you can find us there. You can find us pretty much wherever podcasts are found, except for Spotify, because I still can't bring myself to do it. I know I'm probably blowing it with all sorts of listeners that way. But better yet, you can find our entire archive of podcasts. What number is this one? I forgot to look at the number. We're at least 3. Is this 300? Is this 310? Let me see. Are we up to 310? I don't know. 311. Holy crap. 311 podcasts you can find at stvdpodcast.podbean.com. Hey, if you're a Mad Men fan and you also want to hear something really bizarre, go back and listen to our first couple of podcasts First of all, Dan was an eager beaver the whole time. Our audio, even though our audio was really bad for about 200 plus podcasts, it's like weird back then. It's like an old track where one person's talking in one ear, one person's talking. Oh, it's strange and bizarre, but we're so young and filled with life. And finally, you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle there is at STVD Podcast, as STVD as in serious TV drama. So, Kevin, I apologize for keeping you on for as long as he did. I think I warned you.
It was a pleasure.
I look forward to talking to you again in a couple of weeks when we cover Breaking Bad. I will make sure I give you more room to talk.
This was lovely.
Awesome. I'm glad you're here. I had a great time talking with you, and I think it'll be a great time for folks to listen to. So, and I won't be mean and just suddenly say, you get the last word, which is what I've been doing to people on the podcast, when they usually are like, what? But anyway, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And I wish I could have I wish I had a cool quote from Mad Men in my mind to end it with, but you know.
It's gonna. You'll think of it at 3:00 in the morning.
Yeah, you know.
I can react, and you can just plug it in. Oh, perfect.
You know, unfortunately, I can't say that's what the money's for because we don't get any money for the podcast. So that's what the lack of money's for. Anyway, good night, everybody.